Hello, I am Lisa Massie Tomlins, and I am here with my parents, Dennis and Eleanora Massie, and I'm going to do an interview with them today. I felt very impressed lately to get their story recorded, their life of ministry, raising 3 children, and living for God. And I hope it's a blessing to future generations. Okay, today is August the 10th, 2020, and I'm here in Valdosta, Georgia. We came down to be a part of Callie's 12th birthday party and her baptism service. So that was wonderful. And today I'm interviewing my mom and dad for the first time ever.
We've interviewed you before.
Yes. So, Dad, let's start with you. Where and when were you born?
They tell me I was born March 15th, 1943, in the town of Lebanon, Indiana, in the hospital.
Okay. Mom?
I was born at home in Tennessee, in the countryside. We didn't live too close to a city. The closest city probably was Oak Ridge. And I was born at home, and I was a Tennessee girl.
And what date?
September 24th, 1943. And while I was being born, my oldest brother, Everett, was out taking care of the cow, and the cow stepped on his arm and broke it. So my mama and daddy my mama had that to deal with that day, the day I was born, and she was giving birth to me. I think about that sometimes.
Dad, who were your parents?
John and Eva Massie. Her maiden name was Talbert.
Okay. Mom, who were your parents?
My mom and dad were Glenn and Nellie Friels, and my mom's maiden name was Cook, C-O-O-K.
Dad, who were your siblings? Who are your siblings? And where are you in the order?
Well, I have one dear sister, Sarah Jane Massie Lindsay. And I'm 4 years younger than her, so I was always her baby brother. And I enjoyed that.
Mom?
Okay, there were 5 of us kids in the Friels family. I'm next to the baby, my oldest brother Everett, and then my sister Mary, and then my brother Jack, and then me, and then my sister Polly. And we do have another brother that was born after Everett that lived to be 4 months old, and he died with pneumonia. That was before they had the medicine. Or if they might have had the medicine and they weren't able to get it. I'm not sure on those details.
Or afford it?
It could be.
Dad, how long did you live in the city or town that you were born in?
Actually, we lived out in the country from Lebanon, so that would be the closest hospital. I don't know, maybe 10 miles from there. So we continued to live in the country until I was 6 years old, and we moved to the town of Brownsburg.
And you were 6?
6. Started in the 1st grade. Skipped kindergarten because we lived in the country and could have gone but didn't for whatever reasons.
Mom?
Well,
How long did you live in Oak Ridge?
we moved a lot back in those days. That's what people did, because my daddy was a coal miner. So I was born there, and I think we moved to Caryville, where my younger sister was born, and then before I was 5 years old, we moved to Indiana. So my growing up years are all Indiana.
Do you remember why your family moved, Dad, to Brownsburg?
Yes, we wanted to get out of the country. And we never became city slickers though, but my mom and dad were not together at that time. So giving credit to my dad, he bought this house. Oh, when we saw that house for the first time, oh, we were so disappointed. Sarah and myself. It was wood siding and it needed painting. But my dad had an eye and he knew what he was going to do with that house. And he fixed it up beautifully later. But we wanted to live into town, I think, closer to the schools and closer to the store. And eventually, of course, I don't know how the story's going to come out, but my dad accepted Christ, came back home, and started to say we lived happily after.
Yes.
You're getting ahead here, son.
Okay, so that's why you moved to Brownsburg.
That's right.
Mom, why did your family move to Indiana?
Oh, that's a big story, so I won't go into too much detail, but Daddy wanted to get out of the coal mine. Mammy and Pap, which would be my grandparents, had already moved to Indiana, and so that was an open door for Daddy to move. Well, my mom didn't want to, but she didn't want Daddy to be in the coal mines all of his life either, because he started working in the coal mines when he was 16, and by that time he was 35. So we moved to Indiana, and that's where we lived the rest of our lives. My mom, it was very hard for her, and she came back to Tennessee at one point, and then she finally came back and said, okay, this is where we're going to live. And it was a wonderful, wonderful thing that we did.
Life-changing.
Life-changing.
It was.
Dad, what do you remember about your childhood?
Well, I remember a loving mother. I remember a praying mother. And I remember combining those two things, loving and praying. I would kneel down beside her. We had a day bed. And my sister, my mother, myself would kneel down to pray. And I loved my mother so much. I'd hug her and kiss on her, and she could hardly pray for me hugging on her. But I have wonderful memories of my mother, and it was wonderful that Dad came home, and he helped us. He helped me to get the discipline in addition to what my mother had been trying to do all those years. He would say, "Do what your mother said." And I got the message clearer, and it helped me a whole lot. And we had a good family. You know, my parents had some theological discussions, but that was getting me ready to be a preacher.
Mhm.
I realized later,
Mhm.
and but we had a good home.
Can you talk a little bit about your paper route and your dog?
Oh, well, the dog was in the country with us, Fuzzy, and he was a great dog. But when we moved to town, the dog was a problem because of an outside dog, and our neighbors had some ferns growing in their yard, and she would go over and lay down on those ferns in the heat of the day because it was cool. It was on the north side of the house, and she became such a problem. We had to get rid of the dog. My mother wanted me to have a paper route, and I was only 9 years of age. And in those days, you bought a paper route, 30 cents a customer. So this guy that had the paper route, young guy, he didn't want me to have it. He thought I was too young. But my mother prayed, and I got the paper route. So that I became a little businessman having that paper route. Plus, I mowed yards.
Wow. Great. Mom, what do you remember about your childhood in Indiana?
Well, we began living in Indiana on Michigan Town Road. That's where I remember our first house, and that's where we started out. That was the beginning of our family coming to Christ, living in that house, and the church and the pastors and the people from the Michigan Town Church, they came and they got us kids in church, and eventually got my mom and dad in church. And the Sunday that my dad and mom went to the altar, I can remember, this makes me cry. We all five of us kids just go up there too. We just thought that's what we were supposed to do, and it was life changing. And my mom, she told us, she says, I didn't really get saved that day, but that's what Daddy did, so that's what I did. And I have a little bit of a memory, not much, because I was like 4 or 5, of my mom not wanting to do what Daddy wanted us to do. But then eventually she came around and she accepted Christ and followed Daddy. And all of his kids were in the church 3 times a week, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, from that day forward till the day, well, to this day. And that was the beginning of our life, the transformation of our life. You know, we were the only ones of the family, Daddy's family, 10 brothers and sisters that became Christian and went to church. And Daddy suffered persecution a little bit from that. But eventually, many of his brothers and sisters and his mom and dad came to Christ. But that's where our childhood started. And then a lot of my memories, we moved out into the country, to Rossville. And we were able to live in the house rent-free, and we would take care of the farm animals. And that helped Daddy and Mommy financially. Many of my childhood memories are there.
Yes.
Going to school there, playing on the farm there, playing in the woods, riding the school bus. A lot of my memories are there.
And was it there that you tasted your first pop soda?
Oh, I think so, because we didn't have candy. If we had candy, it was special, and we never had soda pop. But one Saturday, I think it might have been my brother Everett that said, "I'm going to buy you a Pepsi." And I remember taking a drink of that Pepsi out of the bottle, and it came out my nose, and it just made my eyes water. And I was like, oh, I didn't like it, but I wanted to like it because everybody thought it was wonderful.
Coke is better.
Coke is, anyway, we drank Pepsi, and eventually, you know, we still weren't able to have pop at the house or anything because my mom didn't allow all that sugar. So, but it was a wonderful memory.
Dad, how would you describe your years in high school, and then maybe your decision about what college you went to? And
Well, of course, we had moved to Brownsburg, so I went to grade school in Brownsburg. And by the way, I love school. And my mother and I prayed before I went to school every day. I don't think we ever missed. But I love school. I wasn't a straight A student, but pretty close. And so when I was about 16, I think, we moved to Arizona. So I finished my high school in Arizona at Phoenix North High School. And that was an interesting experience. The school was spread out like a college campus, and going from building to building. It was a broadening experience, and I graduated from there in 1961. So, what else did you ask me about school?
I'm going to ask that question later.
Oh, okay.
About your college choice.
Okay, that'll work better, yeah.
Mom, what do you remember about, say, middle school and high school?
Okay. From the farm, we moved to Frankfort because Daddy wanted us kids to go to the Christian high school and the college if we could or wanted to. So, but the high school didn't start until 9th grade, so we had to go to the public school, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And those years, I remember those years, but I don't remember a whole lot about them. But the high school, that's when 9th grade, we were able to go to the Frankfort Pilgrim High School, which was on the same campus as Frankfort Pilgrim College. So it was a wonderful experience because we were able to make friends from all over the Midwest because people came there, sent their children there to go to school. And we were taught, it was like a religious school. We were safe from the world. We were safe from all the things that was going on in the world. And I think that was probably life-altering for our family, each one of us, because we all went to that school and graduated.
Dad, you have talked a little bit about your mother, but can you tell me anything more about her personality,
Well, everybody who knew her realized she was a godly person. She didn't get saved till I was 2 years old, and she liked, she liked Bing Crosby, that type of thing. She liked to dance. So, in fact, she was in the movie theater watching a movie when I started deciding I wanted to come out. So
Labor pains.
anyway, but she just was like, she was like a little bird that just couldn't get enough nourishment. Just couldn't. She just drank it all, and she was so thirsty for God. So she changed a lot, and that my dad still wanted to be worldly, so that caused some conflicts. But she stayed true to the Lord and faithful to the Lord all the rest of her life, and influenced my sister, my father, other relatives, everybody in the church that she went to. She had a prayer list. We found those prayer lists after she died. And I don't know if this is speaking selfishly, but I was always at the first. I guess I needed more prayer than the rest of them. But she prayed that I'd be a preacher. And she told my dad that. He said, "Go for it." So I love being a preacher. And that's probably because my mother prayed that I would be.
What were some of her gifts and talents and loves?
She would raise a garden, so she could cook. And she always was interested in people. When Eleanora came into the picture, it was like she accepted her from day one. And my sister, of course, is involved in all of this. My sister's a wonderful person. They just don't come any finer. And she was influenced by my mother. Both of us were, as children. She taught us to pray. And she taught us to live right. She was honest. And she reached out to people.
Was she integral in your piano lessons?
Well, yes. When we first started taking piano lessons, my sister and I, we did have a piano. Thank the Lord for that. But my dad was not home yet, so she would take money out of the grocery money to pay for our piano lessons. And the teacher was right next door, Grace Mallory. So, that's kind of what she sacrificed.
Did she play the piano? Did she love to sing?
That's an interesting question. She loved the piano, and she wanted to know how to play the piano, but she never had the opportunity. So later on in life, my dad got her an organ as well as she had a piano, and she would play the piano and she would play the organ. She kind of self-taught herself to play. I think sometimes she even played in her small church.
Mom, tell me about your mother.
My mother, Nellie Frills, she was a wonderful housekeeper. She was a minimalist. If she wasn't using it, it was out of the house. Get rid of it, out. And we weren't happy about that because, children wanted to keep this and that and the other. But that's just how she was. That's how she kept house. She was always busy. If she didn't have something to do, she'd take the curtains down and wash them and iron them. And she was just always busy. And she taught us children to work. Every Saturday morning we couldn't go do anything fun until we had our chores done. My chore was dusting. I had to do dusting. I'm not sure what everybody else's chore was, but my mom made the house work. And she kept us children neat and clean, and always made sure we had the right clothes for any occasion. And I appreciate her so much for that. But my mom was very shy and introverted, just the opposite of Daddy, of course. And but she was the oldest of 10 children, and my daddy was the oldest of 10 children. And so there we had 2 firstborns as parents. So that plays a lot into who we are as 5 siblings.
And she
but
was older than him.
She was 4 years older than Daddy, and when they got married, Daddy said that Mommy could walk underneath his arm. He held his arm out, and she could walk underneath it without touching. After Everett was born, she grew a couple inches, and she couldn't do it. So that was really, really something, we thought.
How tall was she?
She was very short. I don't know, probably,
5 foot?
yeah, maybe. She was always tiny.
And your dad was tall.
My daddy was 6'1". Yeah.
And can you talk to me a little bit about her gardening and canning?
Oh yes, yeah. There was a garden was always in our life, and when we lived in Rossville, we did chickens and eggs, and she would kill the chickens, and us kids would help her, and I remember that vividly. And she would can green beans, and she would freeze corn because we would have a freezer, and she would can tomatoes, and she would do whatever, green beans, corn, tomatoes, all that stuff. And we always, I remember we never had leftovers on our table. I guess because there was 5 kids and everybody just ate. And this is a little sideline. When Dad and I got married, I said, well, what am I going to fix today? I was just thinking out loud. Dad said, well, let's just have leftovers. And I didn't know what leftovers were. I thought, leftovers? We never had leftovers in our never. And it just, I had a lot to learn.
I had a lot to learn.
Can you both of your mothers had long hair
Yes.
and had it updo onto their head.
Yes.
Can you talk to me a little bit? I've seen Mama with her hair down. I don't know if I ever saw Grandma with her hair down. Can you talk
Yes,
about that?
yes, I can. Our family was saved into the Pilgrim Holiness Church. If you go into that church building, you would see all the ladies with their hair pulled back in a bun or a French roll or some kind of something that kept their long hair up out of the way.
And very pretty.
Oh yes, lovely. They'd make a wave or something here. Well, so when we were saved and got into the church, my mom had beautiful black hair and she just curled it, but then she had to let it grow because that was the belief. And she would, I think, she was always conscious of what Daddy thought about everything. So she thought Daddy didn't want her to cut her hair. He wanted her to have it long. But I think I remember when I was already grown up and married, I'd come home and she would say, I need you to trim my hair. It was still long, but Daddy was okay with her trimming her hair. And then, but she would always wear it up, and I would fix her hair beautiful and for church on Sunday. She would never cut her hair. Even after she got very old and was in the nursing home, I remember the grandchildren would say, Mama, let us, just cut your hair and you won't have to wear. She would never, she said, I don't think Glenn would want me to do that, even though Daddy had been gone. So it was the church that we were saved in, and it was their beliefs, their rigid rules. They had lots of rigid rules, and that stayed with her whole life.
Do you remember, you have anything to add, Dad, about your mother's hair?
No, it was a similar
Similar
teaching,
experience.
and she wanted to be obedient.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and I think it was an obedience thing. They felt like they felt like they might be worldly, and that church taught that to refrain from worldliness.
Right.
And as we grew up, we girls, we had long hair.
Mhm.
We didn't wear it up in buns or anything, but we had long hair.
All right, let's talk about your fathers, and then we will take a break. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Dad, tell me about your father and just the whole thing about him leaving and then the Lord saving him, and his personality and his influence on your life.
Well, a father is a gift, of course, and we're conscious that there are some people have not had a father in their lives active, but Eleanor and I both were blessed to have good dads. Took him a while to come to the Lord. He was 35, but when he came to the Lord, he was like my mom. He studied the Bible so much. The first 2 years after he was saved, there was a sweet lady in the church says, "John, I think you're going to get a call to preach." And he told me about that, and he said, I don't have a call to preach. And he didn't. But he was a good dad. He was highly intelligent. In fact, he was so intelligent that sometimes he was a little short with people that didn't catch on. So I think sometimes he called me a jughead. I didn't listen very well, but that was my stubbornness. But I didn't feel bad that he called me that, because it was probably true. But I love my dad. He felt bad because he was not there for my sister, myself, and for those 7 years that he was gone. So he made it up to us. He made it up to us many, many ways, both to Sarah and to myself.
Can you talk a little bit about what he did in his young adult years to make money, and then maybe a little bit about your visits with him and what went on during those times when your parents were separated and he would come back to visit?
Oh, okay. Well, he started out, you can't do this now, but he started out in the factory where his father worked, and he was a bench grinder, so that was a low job. And he worked himself up to be an engineer. That's how smart he was. So he made good money. And so he would come out in his red Chevrolet pickup truck, usually every weekend. And Sarah and I would get in the back. I think we took the dog with us. And we went to town, because we were living in the country, and got groceries. And he would come back. And Sarah remembers this, that when he would get ready to go back to Indianapolis on probably Saturday evening or whatever, my mom would cry.
Would she have cooked a meal for him?
Oh, yeah.
And what else did she do
I
during
don't
that
know.
time? Laundry?
She was good. Yeah, probably laundry. I hadn't even thought about that. She probably did his laundry. She did whatever she could. She would cry. And so we had that going on. And then I think when we bought that house, when we moved to Brownsburg, I think he even started remodeling that before he actually came home. So he was active in our lives, just not as much as what really should have been. But when he did come home, he was there. And so.
What brought him home? You want to talk about that?
My
now?
mother's prayers.
Right.
And fasting.
Yes.
She would contact radio programs, gospel programs, and she'd write them letters, and she'd say, "Pray for my husband, John Massie, that he'll be saved and come home." And so people probably all around the world were praying for my dad. And there were people who said, "Eva, don't do that. Don't pray for him to come home. He's not going to come home. You're crazy." 7 years later, her prayers were answered, and he came home. It was Mom's prayers.
That had to be difficult at first, but wonderful. Probably a mix of emotions for everyone.
It was some adjustment. But maybe I'm going too long here, but because she prayed, I grew up in a home where there was some, along with happiness, because my mother was a good woman, there was sorrow. And I can remember my mother crying, just pouring out her heart to God for my dad, just crying and praying. So that again prepared me for the ministry, because you don't get by with living glibly in this world. Life has some serious things that go on, and it takes calling out to God to make it.
She wrestled.
She wrestled. That's a good way to say it.
Yeah. Mom, can you talk to us about your dad and maybe just what you remember before salvation and then after salvation and how he influenced your life?
Well, I don't remember him personally before salvation. I was too little. But my mom told me that if he was working on the car, Everett was the one that had to help him. And Everett would hand him the tools, and if Everett handed him the wrong tool, he would just throw it. He had such a temper. And my mom said when he got saved, that stopped. That just never happened ever again. His temper was gone. So that has been a wonderful influence on me. And but my dad was the biggest influence in my life because he was a leader, and he would say, "This is what you're going to do, and I'll help you do it," or even if you don't want to do it, you're going to do it, and this is how you're going to do it. And that had to do with church stuff, school stuff, anything. Singing, definitely singing and music. We were pushed that way, and thank the Lord that we were. But that was my dad. My mom didn't have that influence on us in those areas. She was mostly in the home thing. But with our personalities and our preparing us for ministry, I guess is the way I would say it, because that's what it did. But we didn't miss church, and that was Daddy. Even after he had worked 10 hours a day, he'd come home and we'd go to revival. 2 weeks of revival. We never missed church. Never, unless you were sick in bed. So he was a very, very strong influence in our life.
Talk about the dinner table.
Oh, the dinner table. My dad was a talker. So the dinner table was his place to talk. And he would talk about his work. And he would talk about the guys at work. And so we all felt like we knew those guys at work personally, because we'd want to know about them.
Yeah.
And we lived vicariously through his stories. I think we did, you know? And it was our window to the world. We did not have TV in our home, but our window to the world was, I think, through Daddy, telling stories about people and what went on at work. And but that was every table time. He talked, and it taught his children about life. We didn't even know it, but that's what it was doing.
And how did he approach those problems at work and those people as a saved man? Could you tell?
Oh yes, he never behaved unseemly, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
He would just tell his frustrations, or how his hands were tied in situations. He was a hard worker.
And then can you talk about his heart to reach people for the Lord?
Oh yes, Daddy had a very, very tender heart. We grew up in a church where on Wednesday night would be prayer meeting, and people would have opportunity to stand to their feet and give a testimony of what God was doing in their lives. And my dad always took opportunity to praise the Lord, and he would always cry.
Yes.
You probably remember
I remember
that.
Yes.
And he had such tender heart, and that's, I think, what drove him to drive the van for the church and drive the bus for the church and bring children to Sunday school, and that's what he wanted to do.
And your mom baked cookies?
My mom would make cookies, and that became my mom and dad's thing. After us children all left home, they had to have some brood to take care of, and it was the children. And Daddy would go around on Saturday and, "Are you coming tomorrow? I'm going to pick you up." And Mommy would always have chocolate chip cookies that she had made, and they loved it. Sometimes my mom wouldn't be as happy about it as Daddy, but Daddy never, he loved it. And that was something that he did.
And eventually, what kind of vehicles did he have for that?
He had, I think, had a bus for a long, long time. And then Michigan Town Church was just a little church. And eventually, Michigan Town Church went down. Then they had a van, but it was always full of children. I think you might remember the van, Lisa.
I do.
And it was a wonderful thing for us to see our Daddy like that. It influenced us even when we didn't know it was influencing us. It was wonderful.
That's really true.
Any other memories of your dad that you want your future grandchildren to know?
Well, I do know that at Daddy's funeral,
Oh.
people came and told us things. It just makes me cry. How he helped them. They needed money. They needed their rent paid. We never knew anything about it. He'd bring them food. He'd give them money.
Yeah.
But yet, when he died, he left quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
He wasn't poor. And he bought that house across the street for Mammy and Pap.
Mhm.
He was generous,
Yeah.
very generous.
Yeah. He lived frugally.
He lived frugally so that he could be a giver.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, I've been so blessed.
Dad, back to your father.
Mhm.
What was the thing he said when he came back home and remarried grandmother? What did he say that was his kind of mantra for your family? That Bible verse from Joshua?
As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. He heard John R. Rice preach that message from that passage, and he said, that's it.
Yeah.
I've got to go home.
He was
Have to go.
committed. And I remember you telling me stories about how much he gave to the Lord. His tithe wasn't just 10%.
Usually 20%,
Right.
and God blessed him.
And he worked in the churches that he was a part of.
He did.
And what was his favorite song?
I don't know about tomorrow. I just know
Live
holds
for
my
me,
hand.
yeah.
Yeah. That was his favorite song.
Do either of you have anything to add about your parents before we conclude this session?
I was going to say something about her dad.
Oh,
Well, go ahead, Dad.
You asked about how my dad provided. Her dad was limited with education because he was the oldest of 10 children. So he had to start out with a low job. But when he got that job at Fairfield and Lafayette, he worked himself up, and he was a millwright.
yeah.
And I'm sure he made good money, but
Yes.
he worked at that, and he was smart.
Yeah, that was one thing I didn't say about Mommy and Daddy. Mommy only went to the 6th grade, and I think that it affected her feeling of her introvert, her inferior feeling, and Daddy only completed the 8th grade. But
They did very well.
They
oh
did well.
yes, it
Very
didn't diminish our upbringing at. I don't feel like it did.
I think all four of them were very hard workers, and their lives were transformed
Yes, by the gospel.
by the gospel.
My father's favorite verse was, "Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. Old things are passed away, behold, all things have become new." I remember him quoting that time after time, because that was a picture of him.
Yes. And do you think that all four of them probably had to fight to fight sin once they were saved?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
we all do.
My daddy was addicted to cigarettes, and I think maybe John was too.
Yes.
And my mom did snuff, and they gave that up because when you're a Christian, you live clean. And I don't know about their battle with it, but I'm sure it was a battle. It's a battle to give up an addiction.
Sure. Okay, well, this has been wonderful, and this concludes session 1.
Whoever's listening, God bless you. We love our daughter.
Okay, this is starting segment or session 2 of the interview. And Dad, I would like you to talk a little bit about your grandparents, the ones that were alive and that you know of and remember.
All right, it's going to be sketchy and limited. Both my grandmothers died. My mother's mother, my mother was 8, and the same with my dad. When he was 8, his mother died. So my father's father never remarried. So I don't have a grandmother memory that way. But my mother's father remarried, and I remember her, Bertha, lived in Lafayette later.
What was his name?
Oh yes, Omer Talbert.
Omer Talbert.
Omer Talbert.
That was your mother's father.
Yes, and my father's name was Jesse Massie. So So Omer Talbert was a man that he loved to be around people, and there were 5 children in the family. My mother was the oldest, so he remarried, and then for some reason they still remained friends, but it didn't work out. So over a period of time, he had some girlfriends, and he married a few times, and but he was a very fine fellow. So during those times he was married to those women, whether it was a grandmother or figure or what, we still kept in contact. So he was an influence on me. But like I said in the beginning, it's a little sketchy. But I want to say this. Over the years, I've been around people that have had grandparents in their lives. And, I thought, well, I didn't have that. But I had a wonderful mother. So I want to be thankful that even though I didn't have maybe what some people have had, I had a wonderful, wonderful mother.
She made up.
Yes.
Mom, can you talk about your grandparents that you knew and remember?
Yes. My
And their
grandparents,
names.
my dad's mom and dad were Jess and Nellie Frills. And they had moved to Indiana before we did, and they lived in a big brick house in Mulberry. And every Sunday, all 10 children would come and bring their kids, and we would have Sunday dinner together. That went on for years. I don't really know what happened about how that dissolved, probably because the growing up of the children. But my mammy and pap is what we call them. They were wonderful. Mammy was a gentle, comforting grandma to all the grandchildren. And I remember, the thing most that I remember that I would like to tell about them is after we grew up and Mammy and Pap became old, Daddy had bought the house across the street from him on 4th Street, and Mammy and Pap lived there. And when we had the car wreck and my legs were broken and we lived with Mommy and Daddy, Mammy would come over every day after I got my cast off and rub my legs with lotion and that's a hard thing. You know, she was old.
Yes.
And but she did that every day because my legs
She loved you.
She loved me, and it was gentle, and she was so kind, but that was a wonderful thing. I never forget that about her. But going back a little bit, when they lived in the big brick house in Mulberry in the country, Mammy and Pap had a big garden because that's how they survived. But from the time I was about 12 years old, or maybe even earlier, in the summer, Daddy, I would get up early and I'd get in the truck with Daddy, and he would drop me off at Mammy and Pap's home, and he would go on to work, and I would help them, canning and the garden, pick things in the garden. I worked in the garden and helped her with can. I remember that. That's a big memory in my mind that I did that for her or with her. I don't know why I did it. Maybe Daddy made me do it, or maybe I wanted to do it. I don't know. But I did it. But it made we were very close because, and lots of times I would spend the night, so I'd just be there maybe for 2 or 3 days in a row. But that's a big memory of mine. And Pap was a cut-up. He was a teaser, a cut-up and a teaser, and I don't remember much of anything else about him except that he wanted to cut up and tease and pull jokes on all the grandchildren and laugh. That's just who he was.
Yes. Do you remember your mother's parents?
And my mom, no. My mama's dad, his name was, why can't I remember his name?
What were their last names?
Cook. Granny, we called her Granny Cook. And his name, why can't I remember that? Because he died before I was born.
Okay.
I think he died after Mary was born. So we didn't know him. We knew Granny. But because we lived in Indiana, Granny was in Tennessee. And we would come to Tennessee once a year, sometimes not once a year, but we would see Granny. And
What was she like? Do you remember?
Granny was kind of sober.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't laugh a lot, but she liked to eat cookies and sweets, and she always wanted us to eat cookies and sweets. She would always have sweets and cookies in the house, and but we never felt real close to her because we weren't with her much. But she, when we would come to her house, she would always, because she had lots of knickknacks and pretty things, and she'd say, "Pick something you want and take back to Indiana with you."
Do you know if she ever came to the Lord?
We don't know for sure. I think I asked my mom one time, and she's in her last year. She lived with my mom's sister Lily in Harriman, Tennessee, and Lily says that she thinks that her preacher from her church would come and visit Granny, and so she thinks that he got a decision out of her. She wasn't 100% sure, and I don't know about my grandpa.
Do you think that your family's salvation and the change in your parents influenced her?
Oh, she knew.
Mm-hmm.
And so did all of my mom's siblings. My mom there were 10 of them. She was the oldest. They all knew,
Mm-hmm.
and they would come to Indiana and visit us,
Mm-hmm.
all those siblings, one by one, and some of them even lived with us from time to time.
Did any of them come to the Lord?
I think so. Woody, because they became church members, and Woody and Carl and what can I think? And Lily, they were church goers, and but I don't remember a lot of details about all of that.
That's good. Now, can we talk about when you both came to the Lord? Dad, can you talk about how you were drawn to the Lord?
I was 9. Of course, Mother had taught me, about Christ. And I prayed at home with my mother and accepted Christ. So I look back to that time for salvation.
And were you baptized after that, or was that
Yes,
not a thing?
in a creek or a river.
Okay.
I
And do you
was.
remember a feeling that you had, or a change that you noticed, or was it hard because you were young?
I just remember, you mean about being saved or
Mhm.
baptized or both?
Being saved?
Well, I was kind of a corker. Even after I was saved, I had a lot of good points, but I was mischievous. And by the time my dad came home, my mother was ready to give up on me. So that tells you what kind of
You needed a father.
I needed a father. So he helped to change me too. But in fact, I was such a mischievous kid. There was a time my mother had to spank me right in church.
Oh dear.
She carried a paddle with her to church.
Yeah.
So I guess
But-
I was a sinner saved by grace.
Right. But you look back to that time at 9
I remember it.
is when you gave your heart and you repented of your sin and trusted Christ. Mom, what about the time you came to the Lord?
Yes, when I was 8 years old in the Sunday school, Wilma Turner was my Sunday school teacher. We prayed, but I don't think I understood about all that, because when you didn't keep all the rules in that belief system, I always felt like I didn't measure up and maybe I wasn't saved. I did that for many years because of the rules. And then when I was a senior in high school, I really surrendered, and I feel like that was my salvation date, because all those rules were very confusing to a young person, because if you break the rules, it was considered a sin, and if you sin, you would lose your salvation. And so that's very difficult on a young person.
Especially if you're sensitive.
Yes, and so I think by the time I was 16 or 17, I was beginning to try to reconcile that in my mind, that I had to accept what Jesus did for me, and then I would just try to live the best I could
And trust in Him.
and trust in Him before I really came to the knowledge of the truth about salvation.
Right. That's great. Mom, I know you didn't have a first car probably till you were married, but Dad, you had a first car. Can you tell me about that?
Oh, it was a classic. It was 11 years old when my dad gave it to me. He promised to me, he said, when you graduate from high school, I'll give you the Plymouth. It was a 1950 Plymouth, had low mileage, it was clean. In fact, it was so clean, so sharp, that when I would go to the filling station or whatever, almost any place I went, somebody wanted to buy it. That's what kind of a classic, neat car it was.
And how old were you when this was given?
I was 18 when
18.
my dad gave it to me.
And where did the motorcycle fall in that?
Well, I had the motorcycle before I had the gift of the car. I
Okay.
bought the motorcycle with my money.
And what kind of motorcycle was it?
It was a BSA, British Small Arms, 650, twin. It was a nice motorcycle.
And were you reckless on it? Do you remember if you were really cautious or reckless?
Well, my dad became very upset with me because I was under his insurance umbrella, and I was weaving in and out of traffic, and I got 4 citations within a year or so, and my dad's insurance went. So he was unhappy with me, and I almost lost my life on it because I wasn't paying attention. Almost ran right into a train. Just missed it. My mother and sister were praying. They were in the car ahead of me. So I made it through those times. But
So-
that was before the car.
Did you sell the motorcycle then?
When we decided to move from Arizona to Indiana, I sold the motorcycle.
Okay, can you talk now about what college you chose and why you chose it?
My mother and I prayed a lot about this issue, and we both knew about this college in Indiana. We were in Arizona when we were praying, of course. And so it just seemed like the thing to do. I can't say that God thundered out of heaven, go to Frankfurt College. I can't say that, but it just seemed like that was the right thing to do. So I did it.
And Mom?
Mom, that's was Daddy's plan for his family. We lived in Frankfurt. He moved us there. I had gone to the high school, and it was a perfect transition. There was never a discussion of anything else.
And how far away was your home from the actual campus?
It wasn't even a mile because we could walk.
You
We
could
walked a lot.
You did?
What would you say? 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 blocks.
Wow.
You know, just
When, Dad, talk about when you first met or saw Mom and what you thought of her.
It was room 104, and she was there in that room, and I just thought, she is beautiful. And I'm still thinking the same thing after all these years.
it's bad eyesight.
I think it was love at first sight.
Did you speak to her that day?
No, I was shy.
Yeah. That was your freshman year of college?
Yes, it was.
Mom, when did you first notice Dad?
I'm not sure.
And what did you think of him?
I'm just not sure. I've tried to think about that over the years when I
Yes.
first, but I think the first time I really noticed him was we were in choir together,
Mhm.
and we would go on the choir bus and go places, and I think that was.
Would you sing at these
Oh
were
yes,
they
the choir.
churches?
Oh yes, we would go to these
Okay.
churches and put on concerts.
And what part did you sing?
I sang alto and he sang bass. And it was a pretty good sized choir, wasn't
was,
it? It was
yeah.
a bus full of us,
That's
and
great.
we had choir robes, and our choir director was Laverne Mall's dad. We called him Brother Mall. He was wonderful.
Fantastic.
Oh, he was
Do
wonderful.
you
And his
remember-
wife, I took piano lessons from her when I was younger. And but I think that's when we got together.
Okay.
And I'm not sure whether we got together, but we kind of talked.
Did you sit on the bus together?
Well,
One night we did.
I got her flashlight.
Oh yes, he took my
And
flashlight.
I said to her, I will give you back your flashlight if you'll sit with me. That was a bright idea.
I remember.
So was it not long after that that you went on your first date?
Our first date was December the 15th, 1961.
Yes.
A
Yes.
Christmas party at the college.
Okay. And were you pretty much like, did you think this is the one?
Oh, we were only 18.
Yes.
Oh,
We were so comfortable together.
Yes.
I mean, just laughed and
Yes.
just.
What was it that you said to Mom on the first date that was just so funny?
Oh, I said, I'd like for you to be in my wedding.
But you didn't specify
he
what
didn't
part.
specify what role.
Flower girl.
And Mom, do you remember what you said to that?
I think I just laughed my head off. So such
Okay,
a
so
silly
that was your
idea.
freshman year?
Yes,
Still?
I mean we weren't even grown up with
Yeah.
it.
And did you continue to date throughout the next 3 years?
Off and on.
Okay.
Was off and on
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just because you were so young and you were trying to figure
Yes.
out.
He needed to get through school, and it was just it
And-
wasn't a constant relationship for 4 years.
I will say she was very patient.
Yes. So, Dad, did you know that you wanted to marry her not long after that?
Yeah, I couldn't. I was so unhappy when we weren't
Mm-hmm.
dating, and I think she was too. At least
Yes.
I'm going to think that anyway. But so we just couldn't live without each other.
Right. And Mom, you did not continue to go to that college.
No, I went to Frankfurt a couple years, and then I went to Marion College, which is now Indiana University.
Right.
So
Indiana Wesleyan.
Indiana
So,
Wesleyan, yes.
so you were not together many days.
Many days now. We were apart many times.
And how did the engagement happen? Can you talk about that, Dad? Like when you
I
decided.
could take you to the place.
Yeah.
But it's not there.
But it
right
was
now.
like Christmas, wasn't it? Wasn't it around Christmas?
I think it was.
Uh-huh.
And we were standing on the steps of the chapel, and I said, Eleanora, will you marry me April the 17th?
Yeah, he put a date to
And
it.
she said, Dennis, I will marry you anytime. I thought, wow, I didn't expect that answer.
Oh, he put a date to it.
Yes. And were you waiting for that question,
I
Mom?
think I was, yes.
Because he was a senior
Yes.
in college.
Yes.
And wow,
So
that's that.
that's that.
Tell me a little bit before we talk about your wedding about what each other's parents thought and
Well-
how that, you know.
Well, I don't think my mom and dad, because we had such a stormy
Mm-hmm.
relationship or courtship, I guess, they were skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
But
I don't blame
I don't
them.
think his mom and dad, I'm not sure what his mom and dad said. What did they say to you?
Well, they didn't say very much because
He was getting ready to graduate college, and
They knew that was your decision.
they liked her, though.
Yes.
Very
yeah, I
much
had been
so.
with them
Ooh.
many times.
And talk about how both families felt about each other through the years, like how those
Oh.
feelings grew.
It was sweet. We'd go, my parents would come to her family reunions. Wasn't that wonderful?
Yeah, but they'd say, "Can we?" If we were having something other than the family room, they'd say, "Well, can we come?"
Oh, it was so sweet.
So, of course, we were all happy, and my mom and dad and his mom and dad,
oh,
Were
they
friends.
they were friends.
yeah, it was wonderful.
Yes.
Just wonderful.
Tell me a little bit about your wedding day.
Oh boy, it was the day before Easter. I don't know. That shows you how young and we weren't thinking. I mean, that's one of the biggest days in the life of a pastor in a church. But here we were having a wedding at the First Wesleyan Church in Frankfurt, and we had quite a
Mhm.
big,
It was
attendance.
a nice wedding.
and we had 4 attendants, and it was 1:30 in the afternoon. The weather was even though it was
Perfect.
April and it could have been rainy and cold, but it was warm and sunny. And
And what was the name of the church?
Frankfurt First Wesleyan Church, Frankfurt, Indiana. On the corner there, just a couple blocks from our house. And
It
You
was
remember?
Pilgrim at that time.
Was it Pilgrim at
Do you
that time?
remember who married you?
Yes.
Uh,
Lee Linker and Joe Brown.
He was my pastor at Michigan Town, and Joe Brown was the pastor at First West. We were dear friends with both of them.
Mm-hmm. Good people.
And tell me a little bit about the music.
Well, it was old-fashioned music according to today, but it's "I Love You Truly" or "Always," because David Wilson played the organ and Carl Trent sang.
And did Dad do something
Oh yes,
special?
and Dad sang to me. We faced each other, holding hands, and he sang "I Love You Truly." I think was that a surprise to me? I'm thinking that was a surprise.
Maybe it was.
I
Were
think it
you
was.
nervous, Dad, to do that?
I don't think he was.
He meant it with all his heart.
I did. I still do.
He wasn't nervous. He didn't. His voice didn't crack. He did great.
And that was probably, you were comfortable because you were in the college quartet
Mm-hmm.
and you had those people there with you.
Yeah.
Those
Carl,
men.
Carl was in the quartet.
That's
David
good. That's good.
was the pianist.
And was one of them
Paul.
your best man?
Ronnie.
Ronnie McClung.
Right.
Yes, he was my best man.
And what was the name of your quartet, Dad?
The Voice of Praise.
Yes.
And Ronnie was our leader. Paul was our piano player. And
You traveled
we traveled with the president, Brother Hurdle.
and made a record.
Yeah, we cut a record. Yeah.
Okay, so after your marriage, where did you live?
We lived at 358. Well, first we lived in a little
Cottage.
apartment. Yeah, the cottage at the chapel,
On the
at
campus.
the
Okay.
campus. Then we went to 358 Southeast Street, had an apartment, upstairs apartment.
We lived there for about a year before we moved to Kokomo.
Okay.
Yes.
And was I born before you moved to Kokomo? Or after you moved to Kokomo?
We'd already moved to Kokomo, we had the wreck, and then you were born.
I was pregnant when we had the
Right.
wreck.
Can you talk about the wreck a little bit, Dad? You can give your side of it.
Well, yeah, this drunk guy just ran head in to our car. I had no way to get away from him. Thankfully, we weren't going very fast. We were going about 20, and he was going probably 45. And poor Mom, both of her legs were broken right below the knees. Her right ankle was broken, and she was pregnant with you. She was 5 months pregnant.
And what about the seating in the car was integral in,
No seatbelts back in those days.
but where were you sitting, Mom?
I think I was probably sitting over close to Dad. That
She
was what you did back in those days. You didn't have seatbelts to constrain you. You know.
So were your knees up?
I imagine they were, because you know the car had those humps, and then when you have an impact like that, it just happens so quick. You have no. It just
So do you think that saved me?
probably it got my legs and saved you. Probably.
Oh, that's probably right. Yeah.
Otherwise, it could have been.
Talk a little bit about being stuck in the car and Dad being out.
Yes, it was February and it was freezing
Oh,
cold. It was in Kokomo, Indiana, and
cold.
it was freezing cold. And when you have an impact like that and you see all this smoke, I was so afraid there was going to be a fire or an
She was.
explosion. I was just, please get me out, but I couldn't move. And the filling station that we had just come from called 911, or did they have 911 back in those days? Called somebody, and it seemed like forever. It probably wasn't, because Dad couldn't just get me out and set me down in the
No.
snow, because it was snow and ice, and it seemed like forever. And then when they tried to get me out, oh, the pain. So I knew I was in trouble. The pain was immense. But it all finally worked out, and they got me in the ambulance. And
And they weren't holding her legs up.
oh yeah, and they had to put.
She was crying.
They tried to
please.
straighten my legs out with all that brokenness, and it was. I think I passed out at one point, because it's like I came back to, and the pain will do
Shock.
something terrible to you.
You didn't move for 24 hours.
Yeah, 24 hours they couldn't. I didn't feel you, and so we didn't know.
And Dad, were you hurt?
No, I got a hard head. I grabbed the steering wheel when I saw what was happening, and when we impacted, I went up like this and I hit my head right on the corner post coming down. So I didn't get hurt.
Little scratch or?
Little bruise.
Yeah, they attended it at the hospital.
Wasn't much.
They sent him home.
Yeah. So Mom, what happened in the next few months to you?
Well, I was in the hospital 2 weeks, if you can believe that, 2 weeks for broken legs. And the guy that was driving the big truck that hit us was in the hospital too. And he was right across the hall from me. And he was he was yelling and screaming. And we found out later why, because he drank all the time and he wanted his alcohol. And he didn't have it. And he had a lovely wife and lovely grown daughters. And they just a lovely family. And so finally they moved him away because I just couldn't handle all that. It was just traumatic. And I don't know why they kept me in the hospital so long, but I guess it's just what they did. They were concerned about the baby, you.
Mm-hmm.
And
They had to get your pain under control?
you had to get a pain in, and they were giving me that strong medicine, and I was so fearful about taking it, but Tylenol, or it just wouldn't do it. So,
Did you go home with casts on your legs?
oh yes, the casts were from my toes to my hips, both legs. So they made them so they would bend. So I couldn't be straight. I could sit in a wheelchair. And so after 2 weeks, I went home. We had purchased a home there in Kokomo, Indian Heights. Dennis's mother came and stayed with us 2 weeks. And we had to decide what to do because she couldn't just live with us. So we all got together and decided that we would go live with my mom and dad, and we would put our house up for rent. So we found someone to rent our house, and we took all of our belongings and put them in one of the bedrooms, and whoever we rented it to agreed with that because we rented it to somebody that didn't need the whole house because it was a big house. It had a big family room built on the back with a fireplace, 2-car garage, so it was a big house. So we could do that because we made arrangements with them that we were coming back. We didn't know when, but we were coming back after I got better.
And Dad, were you working a regular job at that time? Where were you working?
Chrysler, automatic transmission factory.
And what did you do there?
Well, I worked on the assembly line.
Okay.
So I just had a little gun and I put 3 plugs in the side of the transmission.
So he was able to go right back to work, and I was the problem.
Your mother took care of you?
We went to Frankfurt. My mom, Dad took care of me, took care of Dennis, packed his lunch every day, send him out the door, fixed dinner. Mom did everything for me. She had to do everything for me.
How long did you live there?
So the week of July the 4th, and that was, the wreck happened in February, and we probably moved there in March after 2 weeks in the hospital, 2 weeks with, probably in March till July the 4th.
What was it like having me with weak legs? Like,
Well, I couldn't take care of you. I couldn't stand up on my own, so I couldn't. My mom, that's why she loved you so much. She took care of you. She felt so close to you. She had you. And then I gradually, even when we went home in July, I wasn't strong. I don't know why we did that. But
I was in a hurry to get back. I wasn't thoughtful of her.
I couldn't function very well. I don't remember how I did it. I think I did it with my walker because I had the walker for so long because my legs were very weak. And back in those days, they didn't send you to physical therapy. Physical therapy is a wonderful thing. And so I was weak. I was weak for years.
right.
And
And I was how old when you were pregnant? Got pregnant with Todd?
yeah, I got pregnant with Todd. Then you're 15 months apart. And so
2 babies.
yeah, 2 babies to take care of. But we had wonderful neighbors and had 2 teenage daughters that they came over. They just wanted to take care of you, and they helped me so much. I kid you not.
They did.
They helped me so much. As soon as school was over and the bus would come, and they'd come over there and help me.
So, emotionally and spiritually, how did that wreck change your life?
Well, we knew God. What would you say, honey? We both knew that God spoke through that.
Mm-hmm.
We were so young and inexperienced, we weren't sure what He was saying. But I know this about myself. I was so selfish. Most young girls are so selfish and wanting my own way and not understanding what I needed to be more of a servant and think about other people. And so you just think about all that time I had.
And she
Yes.
didn't complain. She did not complain.
And my dad and Everett came to the hospital that night. It was late when they came, and my dad said, "This isn't going to be good. This is going to be horrible," because I was going to be a horrible patient. I was not going to. He just knew it was going to be a nightmare. I don't know why it wasn't a nightmare. I really don't know, because it could have been, because that's who I was. But it changed me.
I love what Pastor Batman said. He pastored a church in Kokomo. He said, it was very insightful. He said, "Dennis," he said, "you and Eleanor are just getting started in your ministry." And he said, "You're really being tested."
Yes,
That was kind of him.
Because you had started a church in your home,
yes.
and you were, tell me a little bit about that, Dad, the men from Chrysler.
I had a burden on my heart for it was at that time, mostly men employees, about how many? Several thousand. And they were mostly men. And I had a burden on my heart for those unsaved men. Some of them did come to know Christ. I wasn't the only influence, but I had a part. And so, Mom, I found out how good she is at having social events, parties. We invited those guys and their wives to our house.
And they came. It was like,
Oh, it was wonderful.
coming to the preacher's house. It's like, I couldn't believe they came.
We had the best time, and they weren't saved. But we had a wonderful party, and they had a good time.
You had dinner.
Yeah, food, and they'd sit, and they commented, "You can have fun without drinking."
Yes.
They
Because
didn't know they could have fun without drinking. But
And
it was.
did any of those men ever come to Christ, Dad, or remain lifelong friends?
Yeah. Yes.
Both.
Yeah.
Yes, oh yes.
Yeah.
It was an unusual circumstance.
That was the start of your life of ministry together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when you left Kokomo, you had 2 children,
Yeah.
You and
Todd and I.
Mhm.
And where did you move after that?
To Fort Wayne, to North Side Wesleyan. That was December of 1969. Mm-hmm.
And where did we live in relation to the church?
We lived about 3 blocks away.
It was nice.
I remember walking to church a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Not always, but a lot.
Did you like that house?
I loved that house. That is my first memory, that
Yes,
house.
yes. Big,
Big
staircase,
2-story.
bedrooms upstairs.
And how long did we live there?
7
7 years.
years.
And talk about some of the joys of the ministry there in Fort Wayne. Dad, you can start.
Well, we had and Mom and I didn't plan on this, but we had a tremendous youth group. And I don't know if Mrs. R will ever hear this interview, but she had a lot to do with it. Because she would buy those kids things, and she was always there. She came to every church service and brought her 3 teenagers. Well, Donna wasn't a teenager in the beginning,
She
but it
was
wasn't
wanting
long
to be.
until she became a teenager.
She was wanting to
But you had knocked on their door
Oh, yes.
and got them to come to church.
Yes.
And-
Well, it wasn't a cold call. Mrs. Bradley in the church gave me Mrs. R's name. Said she used to go to church in Michigan, and she's not in church now. She has 3 children and a husband. Why don't you go visit them? And I did. And I
They
visited
could.
them and I found out that their children played instruments, and so this little brain started working. And I don't know when I popped it on them. I said, why don't you bring those kids to church and let them play a special? they, they weren't even saved yet, the kids. But it worked.
It was the
It was,
beginning.
it was God's plan. People have been praying for her,
Mhm.
and she'd been out of church for years.
She had a godly mother.
Oh.
I was just thrilled to death that Pat was back in church and serving the Lord and got her life straightened out.
Wonderful
And
memories.
she was a key servant in that
Oh,
church,
Key servant.
along with
wonderful
others.
memories.
Yes,
Oh,
yes. It was
just-
Yeah.
just wonderful. It was a wonderful 7 years.
And Mom's always been the best pastor's wife. Wherever we served, she was just fantastic.
Yes. And the people loved her.
Yes,
Yeah, I loved everybody.
she did.
Yeah.
And those years were the 70s.
Yes.
And then when we left Fort Wayne, where did we move?
We moved to Hammond, Indiana, and I took a course at Hiles-Anderson College, a pastor refresher course, and then I was waiting to find a church to go to, and it took us, I thought it would take 1 year, from the time we moved there. It ended up taking 3 years, almost to the day.
Uh-huh.
It was amazing, almost to the day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of those 3 years was spent doing school, so 2 more years after he finished his classes, because it was just difficult to find a place.
Yes. And you really had a desire to be a pastor again?
I did. I thought maybe I would be like an assistant, because some of the bigger churches have more than one pastor on the staff. But I went to one church in Rochester, New York, and they were going to try to put me in as choir director, and they didn't really know that I couldn't do that. But
It's
the
not your
pastor was
calling.
he was so good. He was so godly. After he listened to me and talked, and we went out to eat and so forth, and I tried to direct the choir in a choir practice, and they were so good to me. But he said to me, Dennis, would you like to become a senior pastor again? I said, yes, I would. He said, that's what you need to do. That's where your gifts are.
And what was his name, Dad? Do you remember?
Modlish.
Pastor Modlish.
I remember that
Nice
name,
man.
yes.
Nice man. And it wasn't long after that we were able to go to Mogador.
Yes.
Yeah.
And who was integral in?
Ronnie Owens. He was in the Fisherman Club, and he said to me one day, he said, my pastor is going to be a missionary in Alaska, and our church needs a pastor. I'd like for you to see what you could do. And I was at such a discouraged time in my life. 2 families from the church came up there to Hammond, and they wanted to talk to me, and I kind of hid from them.
Did you really?
Yeah,
You were just very.
I was discouraged. Mom wasn't discouraged. I thought, I'll never get back into the
Yeah.
ministry. And she says, yes, you will, Dennis.
Yeah.
So she was more encouraged than I was.
But I didn't know that was going on. I think you told me that later. I think he had the attitude, well, if they want me, they can find me.
Yeah.
And they
He
did.
was so
And
discouraged.
they did. Well, the
They
Lord
did.
overruled that,
Yes.
Yes, he did.
and so you were called to come and preach there,
Mhm.
and
It worked.
yeah, I remember borrowing a friend's car
It did.
to make that trip.
Did we?
Probably
Yeah.
Kim.
The
Kim
Smith's
Smith.
car,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It should
and
be.
I remember those times vividly.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
It was
you were
very
12 or 13.
yes, and it was very different atmosphere there than what we were used to, but we fit in.
It was a family atmosphere.
Yes.
That was
it
a
was.
very loving church.
Very loving family.
They cared about each other.
Yes.
Somebody would go to the hospital to have
Yes.
surgery. There, like a lady, there would be 5 or 6 ladies come. Some would work on little projects while they were there waiting. And that was a caring.
Yes.
Loving.
wonderful- it was
We were
great-
a family. It was a
And
family.
they had a very nice parsonage for us to live in.
Mhm.
Like
Yes.
we had never lived in
Such a nice
such
place.
a nice home.
beautiful.
And
New.
I had my own bedroom.
You had your own bedroom.
And we had lots of storage and
Yes.
a garage,
Oh, we
a
have good
step.
memories.
Yes.
And just talk about some of the highlights of those 9 years.
Well, we had a bus ministry, and so it was already going on when we went there. And the church wasn't very old when we went there.
The tent revivals.
Oh, the tent
We
revival.
had 2 tent revivals.
Oh, yes. 1981.
Yes.
We had our first tent revival.
And we moved there in 1980.
80.
Okay.
Randy Taylor was asked to come and be the evangelist. That was his first tent revival. Oh, it was fantastic.
Our people were just all in, worked. It was a wonderful, wonderful
They
thing.
set up a big tent
Mhm.
in the back, which had
Mhm.
lots of acres back there. And we had meals together.
Oh, yes.
It was wonderful.
And then the tent meeting.
The preacher boys came and went out visiting and inviting people. And, yeah, it was. And we had people that came to the church. The Keelings came to the church after the tent revival, and they had visited the tent revival.
It did help our church grow,
Yes.
because our church did grow. We were able to win several. The
Talk-
Bombs and the Brandensteins and
Yes.
I don't know who all.
We got a lot of new people through Dad knocking on doors. Dad, you want to talk about that a little
Well,
bit?
yeah, I did go out and knock on doors. And I did some statistic work after we got to Boardman. I found out that any church I pastor where I've gone knocking on doors, on any given Sunday, on Sunday morning in the church service, there's at least 16% of the congregation, and sometimes a little more, who directly come from my door knocking.
It's amazing.
You know, and I thought, well, why isn't it higher? And maybe I would become puffed up and proud if most of those people would come from my door knocking.
But they would kind of trickle in. It would not all be just at once.
Well, that's true. And then sometimes I've heard this said by several pastors, that when you go out and you do evangelistic work, like knocking on doors, you may not get all those people you visit, but God will send other people in. And He's done that.
Mom, talk a little bit about some of the things that you started in the church were Valentine banquets and mother-daughter banquets.
Yes, we were a church that did things so that people could participate and serve. We had a women's fellowship that became very, very active, which the women loved.
And what would you do in that?
We met every month, and
This is at Boardman.
This is at Mogador.
at Mogador.
Yes.
Oh, I thought we were
Mogador.
talking Boardman.
Mogador.
Okay,
You had
Mogador.
WMS?
Yes, we did have WMS, and we met every month, but I was not as, I wasn't an integral part of that. Betty Conley was a
Betty
big part of
Conley.
it. So we're still talking about Mogador, right?
Yes, yes.
Vacation Bible School.
Oh, we had
Vacation
wonderful
Bible School.
vacation Bible schools there.
Fantastic.
And we did have Valentine banquets for the youth.
Yes.
And we had a lot of stuff.
And we had mother-daughter
We had,
banquets.
big mother-daughter banquets.
Par excellence.
Yes.
Yes.
And I don't know how many people were saved and baptized in that church, but it seemed like there was a steady stream of people
Yes.
being added to the church.
Yes.
And you want to talk about the music program?
We had an active music program. We had a choir director. We always had choir practice. So whenever we came to church, we knew that we could enjoy choir. Had a choir Sunday morning, had a choir Sunday night.
And special music?
And we had special music probably every service. And it's just something that we felt like we needed to do.
Mhm.
And the people there wanted to do it.
Yes, they did. They love music.
And I was the pianist and you were the organist after you got old enough to.
And we would have people come on Sunday night just to hear the two of you play.
We would play like 10 minutes before church time,
Mhm.
play together.
Mhm.
I had almost forgotten about that.
And it was all the old hymns.
All the old hymns, yes.
And the flavor of the choir music was more southern.
Mm-hmm.
More southern because those people were a little bit like that.
Mhm.
The ones that were the original people,
Mhm.
that's what they
That's what
liked.
they liked.
But we were able to incorporate some newer
newer music.
anthems and newer music
Mhm.
into it, which they loved.
Mhm. There's good variety.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to talk about Mogador. I know, Dad, when you were there, you painted the church a beautiful beige.
You know why I did that, don't you?
No, for a wedding.
Beverly's.
Beverly
Yeah.
was getting married, and then you and Troy were going to get married the next summer.
Right.
So I wanted to have a
It
nice
was-
appearance.
It was beautiful.
Thank you.
It was very beautiful.
Yes, remember how tall the back of the church was?
Yeah.
I came home from work one day. Dad had the church bus pulled up real close to the building because he had to paint the top, the point. And then he had 8-foot tables, I think 2 of them stacked on top of each other, opened up with the legs, and then he had a big long ladder up on.
No. I had the ladder on the rounded part of the bus.
Oh,
Well, I don't know, but it looked like
looked like
I
Dr.
was
Seuss.
terrified. So I don't know what he did when I wasn't there,
Right.
but that's one of them.
Yes.
I was.
She would come home from work, come down the driveway, and she wouldn't even look over there at me. She just went on in the house. But we got it painted.
Right.
But I tell you what, I cannot remember what I preached on those Sundays when I was doing all that work. So the people must have been very patient with me.
Well,
The Lord took
helped
over.
you. He helped
The
you.
Lord helped you.
Yes.
When I am weak, He is strong.
Right. Now, what year did you move from Mogador,
89.
89.
and where did you go?
We went to Lafayette. And we actually moved to West Lafayette.
Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And what church did you attend?
We attended Faith Baptist Church. Pastor Bill Good was the pastor then. And he was an amazing man. That church had grown 15% every year. They had another location before we got there. They outgrew that. They bought this land out on it'd be the east part of Lafayette.
26.
Yeah, Route 26.
And you were just needing to rest from the ministry?
Well, that's what it turned out to be.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And she got a job right away.
Scholler,
And-
architect.
Architects, and we thought, and she worked there the whole time, we thought, why is she working at architects? There are 26 architects, and they designed a lot of buildings for Purdue. They were a fantastic organization, and she was a receptionist.
I learned a lot there.
She did, and we wondered, is there some time in the future when we're going to be helping a church build a building? And sure enough, God orchestrates every detail of our lives,
Yes.
although we may not realize it at the time.
Now, those 3 years you sat under Pastor Good, you learned a lot. Um,
They had a counseling ministry there, and I took a counseling course and got a certificate for that.
and that was something new to you as a
It was, and a lot of good teachings in that, and I was able to use that in my ministry.
biblical counselor.
Yeah,
Biblical.
people need good counsel if they will seek it.
And you were in the choir, Mom.
Yes, I love the choir. I was in the choir.
And you
They
were
had a
there,
good youth group for Jeb.
Yes.
Jeb
Yes, they
was
did.
in the youth group, had friends there.
and even though those were some hard years because you weren't in the ministry, you look back and how do you feel about that time?
We were able to spend time with our parents.
Yeah.
His mom and dad, my mom and dad. It was invaluable.
Because they were only half
They're-
hour away.
Yeah, half hour away, both of them. So it was wonderful.
That was good for Jeb.
And it was good for Jeb, and it did something for our moms and dads I don't think that anything else could do.
Right.
Because none of the other children were close by that they could go on Sunday and have dinner, or go on Friday night, or go on Saturday. And my mom and dad would come over and come to special things at church, and I think your mom and dad did too. So it encouraged our family.
And her dad and my dad were role models for Jeb.
Yes.
And I do believe he's picked up some good traits from them.
And Papa bought him his first car.
Yeah.
Yes.
Taught him how to change brakes.
Yeah.
And taught him stuff.
And so, right at the end of that time in Lafayette, some things happened. Some big things happened. And do you want to continue to talk about that? Like 3 big things happened then.
It sure did.
Jeb graduated.
Graduated. Dad got the call to be the pastor of New Prospect Baptist Church in Bloomington. And the day that Todd graduated, I don't mean Todd, Jeb graduated, Todd didn't come.
Mm-hmm.
And little did we know that was the beginning of the downward spiral of what was to come.
Right.
But Dad, the day after Jeb's graduation, Dad went to Bloomington.
Mm-hmm.
We stayed behind to wrap up all the stuff. And then we went, Jeb and I went. And moving
What-
truck.
And what year was that?
It was 92. Graduated in 92.
Mm-hmm.
So,
You moved into a big house?
yeah, in the country. We rented a house in the country because they didn't have a parsonage and we weren't in a position to buy a house.
She kept saying, there's something wrong. Todd's not answering his phone.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I kept calling him, but
There's something wrong.
yeah, because the transition, I wanted him to know what we were doing, and
Yes.
I think he knew what was coming up, but he didn't really know what had really happened. And I called him every day, and his voicemail or his answer machine back in those days became full,
Yes.
and couldn't get him. So about 3 weeks or 2 weeks, or it was a very short time after we were after we'd moved to Bloomington, that's when we got the call from you.
Mm-hmm.
You lived in Akron, you and Troy, you were married, and we should have said this, our time at Mogador's when you got married to
Mhm.
Troy.
Yeah.
We should have said that when we talked about because
I mentioned
you married, did you mention that?
The wedding.
For your wedding, right, 1988. But you and Troy, and you hadn't heard from Todd. Todd's friends called you and said, where's Todd?
We made a police report.
You made a police report, and then you called us and said, so that was like at midnight when we got that call.
And so your time at Bloomington,
We just started, we just gotten there.
and it was another different church.
It was different, different congregation.
Mm-hmm.
They were Baptist, but it was different.
Mm-hmm.
But they were wonderful,
They were wonderful
generous
as
people.
well.
That when this happened, when Todd became missing, they were so kind
Oh.
and just.
We were overwhelmed, and they knew it.
And they knew it that we were.
You had to make some trips.
Yes, and they were generous with all of that, and
Then Savannah,
yes,
Yes.
and they were also very good to
The
us.
following year was 93.
the 92. We spent that whole first year at being at New Prospect. I'm not even sure. I don't even know how Dad preached and prepared message. One of the ladies said to Dad, I think you're preaching to yourself every sermon.
And we're all listening. Lily said that.
And we're all listening.
She said-
Because we
she
were in
summed
such
it up.
despair.
Yeah.
We kept going to church and having church, but we were engulfed in that.
Yeah.
And that was that whole year, that first year. And then the trail became colder and colder and colder, and we just, 2 years, I'd say 2 years, we spent
Close to it.
everything we had for trying to find him, and every minute almost. And the church put up with us. 'Cause I don't think we gave very much to the church. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But, so
And
God had a design for that too, even though those were difficult years.
because Jeb left for the
Jeb
military.
left for the Air Force.
What month? What year?
We moved there in June and he left in October. So he was just there through the summer.
So he was gone. I was in Ohio married,
Yes.
and Todd had disappeared.
Yes, it was.
So one day I said to her, you can get this out of the Bible. Am I not better to you than 10 sons? And it didn't fly.
No.
Didn't help anything.
No.
Because she's the mommy.
It
And
was.
it was hard on her.
Yes.
I can't. There are no words to describe it.
Right.
And anybody that's gone through something like that feels the same way.
Yeah.
There are no words.
And you were there in Bloomington till what year?
4 years later, after we went there,
96?
96.
And
And
moved to Boardman.
okay. And can you explain some of your reasonings about coming back to Ohio?
Yeah. You know, when you're married, you can sense what your lover really down deep wants. Todd had disappeared. We didn't think we'd ever see him again. And then Jeb was in the military. We didn't know where he'd land. He ended up landing in a delightful place and meeting a delightful woman, Candace. But anyway, we didn't know. And I just knew. She didn't say a word about it. She didn't nag at me. I knew she wanted to live near you and Troy, children.
We didn't know if it could work. You know, you can't just make something happen. You don't know what the Lord wants you to do. Sometimes it's different from what you want is what the Lord wants.
So I decided to go with what she wanted to do and prayed about it and started making phone calls, kept diligent notes, and I called probably hundreds of churches.
And you were
In Northeast
specifically
Ohio.
looking this
Northeast
that area.
Ohio.
Northeast Ohio.
Mhm.
Yes.
And it worked.
Yeah.
And that's a miracle in itself,
Yes.
how it worked.
Yes.
And I want to spend some time talking about Boardman in session 3,
Oh, sure.
but you believe that God did bring you there
Oh,
so that you could be close to us.
Oh,
We were
yes.
45 minutes apart
Yes.
at that point.
you want to know how I could tell after we'd been there 3 times and at that church and I preached and they had let us stay in the parsonage because it was empty and they had put a bed. Charlie and Shirley had put a bed in the bedroom. So Sunday afternoon we went over there and Mom laid down in that bed and I could tell just the way she laid down in that bed was so comfortable. Okay, God, this is it. I can tell. Isn't that amazing?
Did you feel it, Mom?
Yes, I had deep desire. Even though when we went there, it was just a little handful of people. There were no children. There might have been one child. Of course, I just can't live if I don't have children in church. And I knew that's where we needed just to be.
Yeah. And I had prayed, Lord, don't have any money, but wherever we go, would you please help the church to have a nice, a beautiful parsonage for Eleanora? And that's what it was.
We were very comfortable all those years.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
We were warm in the cold, cold climate.
Yes. Now, before we wrap up this session 2, just tell me, your first grandchild was Savannah, and she did not live. The Lord took her to heaven. But then we had Jessie, and what impact that had on your life?
One thing was to see your joy, you and Troy,
Yes.
to see your joy. It
It
just
was-
did wonderful things to us because you went through the horrors of losing Savannah. And then Jessie was such a delight. And we were able to be there close enough. And
He was born in 1994, so you were still
we were
in
still
Bloomington.
we were still in Bloomington, but I remember his first birthday party. It was there was 100 and some people at his birthday. Everybody was so happy for you because you had a baby and he was alive and he was healthy. And so it was like a celebration for many reasons. And it brought a dimension to our life that we never even knew existed.
And that was just tugging at your heart.
Oh, yes, I just wanted to be there and help you.
And by the time you did move to Boardman, Jack was almost born.
Yes,
Almost.
one of the ladies said, we've got to get them over here because Lisa's about ready to have that baby.
Shirley Friend, bless
Shirley
her heart.
Friend. And so
We'll see you, Shirley.
we got over there.
And now you have 5 grandchildren, 1 in heaven, 6, 1 in
Yes.
heaven. What is your hope for your grandchildren?
I want them to be saved and serve God. I mean, I'm not going to say I want them to be in full-time ministry, but that would be an extra icing on the cake. But if that's what they're supposed to do with their life, but I want them to serve God,
Right.
not just to say I'm saved.
Right.
You know, I want them to serve God by serving others. All of them.
Ditto. And I know they will always be tempted, but
Yes.
we just hope and pray they'll not yield to
Not
those
to yield to
temptations.
those but to move forward in their work for God and their service to God. And I pray that when they grow up, especially John and Callie, as they grow up, they'll keep their eye on that. And if they could go to a Christian college, it would be wonderful. That may not be God's plan. And for Emma, that she'll find the right person to marry. And Jack, Jesse is getting himself settled with a beautiful bride. But if they just serve the Lord and serve people and active in the Lord's work in church,
That's a success.
it's a success.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Would you say so?
I would. I've told her many times, if she wasn't such a good grandmother, I don't know what I'd do.
Oh, honey, grandpas, they have one thing to do. Grandmas have the other.
Don't discount yourself.
Yeah, no, you play a role. The Callie definitely says, Papa keeps us laughing. Let's go over here and get some jokes.
Okay, that concludes session 2.
Okay, very good.
Okay, here we are. We're beginning session 3. And I would like to talk about your experience becoming parents, how that changed you, and maybe talk a little bit about each of us kids.
Well, let's let the mother go first.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Well, your first child, which is Lisa. Lisa, I think we had the name Lisa picked out before we were even pregnant. And I think we had the name Todd picked out too.
Mhm.
It was traumatic. Lisa's birth was traumatic because we had the accident and my legs were broken. We had to live with Mom and Dad for all that time, and I wasn't strong enough to take care of her, and it was just a traumatic thing. But it was a wonderful thing because she was so beautiful. I remember when she was in the nursery, all the nurses just was making over her in the hospital. Oh, she's that pretty one down there, they would say, because she had that black curly hair. Her hair was black and it was curly, and you had lots of hair and had the sweetest little face. And so we were so happy. We were so young and knew nothing about being parents, but we knew that we loved you.
Amen.
And we lived with my mom, and she took care of you for like a good month while we lived there. Jack and Barb lived next door, and Larry Allen was about 3. He'd come to the door and said, I want to see her tootsies. So we'd let Larry come in, and he'd see your tootsies.
He's the cutest.
It was cute. And so anyway, Mammy and Pap were still alive during those times, and she was across the street. And I remember she came over, and it was hot, and we had you just in your diaper lying there on the bed on a blanket. She came in and says, oh, you better put some clothes on that baby. She's going to get her death or something. Old wives' tales, you know, Mammy. So anyway, it was so hot. The week that you were born was the hottest week of the summer that year. I remember that. And so it was wonderful to experience having a baby and going through fixing up your room and enjoying all that wonderful stuff. And
How did it change you, Dad? Or what do you remember?
Oh, I loved you. I've never told you this. We lived in Kokomo. You had your room, had a red carpet there, throw rug, and had your dressing table there, and then your bed over here, the window. And I loved you so much that one day I went in there, and there you were, and I wanted to get down, or you were sleeping. I wanted to get down on my knees and worship you.
Yeah, had that feeling. Naughty, naughty.
But I didn't.
You love your children so much you don't know how to express it. I think that's what that was. Didn't know how to say I love you so much.
I've never experienced that before.
Parents would give their lives for you, for their child.
Right.
So it was wonderful.
How old were you when you had this?
Yeah, how old were you when you had?
How old? I was 24.
And you were 24 too, Dad.
26. No, 24, yes.
24, you were 25.
And what's her birthday?
And Lisa was born on June the 11th, 1967.
2 years after you
2
were
years
married.
after we were married, a little over 2 years.
And what do you remember about me growing up?
Well, you were very music was very important to you, and you could sing those little songs as soon as you could talk. We played music all the time in our house, and you would sing those little songs. As soon as you could talk, you were singing.
She was.
And when you were just able to sit up, we would let you sit at the piano, and you did that. And before you know it,
Middle C, middle C, middle C,
Yeah.
middle C.
before you know it, you weren't in school. You were picking out songs by your ear. So we were thrilled that you were musically inclined. That made us so happy. We're so proud of that. And of course, as you grew, we put you in that direction. We pushed you in that direction, and we didn't have to push, really. You just willingly went that way. So that made us very happy. So 15 months later,
Mm-hmm.
God gave us a boy.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was so pregnant. Todd's birthday is September the 5th, and it was hot. And we had some friends at our house, and I remember I had on this bright yellow maternity dress and had stripes. And I don't know why I remember that dress, but I remember sitting in the chair, so big, and whoever it was at our house. I forget who it was. They said, I think I was swollen in my ankles and everything. I think you better call the doctor. And and I was miserable. I was just miserable, more than pregnant misery. And I was beginning to get toxemia.
Mm.
So they said, come in and we're going to induce you. So that's what we did, because Todd's due date was not the 5th. It was a little later, but not much. So then when he was born, it was difficult because Todd has some issues. He didn't have enough wet diapers, and so he had to have a little surgery, and he cried a lot. But once we got that straightened out, he was a happy baby.
No colic.
No, his difficult times was before we figured out what his problem was, why he didn't have enough wet diapers. And Dr. Longshore figured that out, fixed him up.
Sure did.
And so Todd and Lisa were like twins.
Oh, yeah.
Todd and Lisa were like twins. And
Beautiful.
his favorite thing to do was let you talk and sing and be silly, and he would laugh. You would get a book, and you wouldn't read the book. You'd just be silly all through the book and talk about the characters, and he would sit here. I can see you yet,
Yes.
on the floor,
Yes.
leaning up against the wall, and you being silly with the book, and he laughing. And that was one of your favorite activities.
And she would dress the children up.
Oh yes, I dressed them up so cute, and if we took them to the mall, people would just stop and make over you because you were so cute. And I remember at wintertime, you had a little red coat with animal print collar and a hat to match. And then Todd's coat was brown, kind of plaid-like, with a little boy-looking hat. Oh, you look like a magazine, babies. And people just made over you something.
Yep.
And they thought you were twins because you're blonde. And
Did we fight when we were little?
I think a little, but not a lot. Because Todd let you be you were in charge, you were bossy, and he let you. Now that day came when that stopped,
Yes.
but
Yes.
that's how it was when you were little. And those were the days in Kokomo.
Right.
when we moved from Kokomo to Fort Wayne, Todd was just barely 2 and you were 3, and so the church people just loved you, made over you. You were just,
And did you think you were done with children?
I thought we did because yes, I did, especially me. Maybe not Dad, but
Oh, I wanted 4.
yeah, Dad wanted 4. I don't know
Don't
why.
know how I would have afforded
I don't know.
4.
Yeah, well, he's one. But I thought 2 was great. 1 was a girl, 1 was a boy. I was happy. I was totally happy.
But then in 1973,
God gave us another baby.
Mhm.
I can remember specifically going to the doctor, and I was pregnant. And oh my goodness, I cried. Dr. Foy called Dad and says, "You better talk to your wife," or something like that. I don't know.
He did.
But the Lord helped me. And I had to realize that the Lord gave me this baby, and there was a reason He gave me this baby. I need this baby, and it's going to be a good thing.
And it didn't take you long to figure that out. I mean,
No,
She got over it
I
quickly.
could come over that quickly, and he has, and it's proven that God knew what He was doing, because it's just been a wonderful thing in our lives to have Jeb.
Jeb is now taking care of you.
Jeb is now taking care of us,
True.
looking after us. There's not one thing that we would have a problem. No matter what it is, Jeb would say, "Don't worry about it. I've got it. I've got it." I know he would, and that's a wonderful thing to have that confidence, because we don't have Todd.
No.
I didn't know that.
No,
Dad didn't know that.
no,
no.
but God did.
God knew it. So
And we had Todd for 23 years.
We did.
God gave him to us.
And tell me a little bit about Todd's personality and some of his gifts that you remember seeing as a young man.
Well, remember in the 5th grade Christian school, I think it was Shadyside, he got the best character award for the whole year. 5th grade.
he just had a wonderful way about him. He was always a gentleman. Like me, when we would come home from the store, I couldn't carry anything in. He had to carry it. He had to open the door. He had to be the man. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that. He was
And
we didn't have any trouble out of him.
no, he was such a servant. He was just,
Good boy.
and he would sing. He had a wonderful little voice, wonderful, wonderful voice. And he would sing with us and with you. And
He took lessons.
oh yes, he
on,
took
Saxophone.
saxophone lessons, and he had a knack with that. He could make it sound really good.
Yeah, nice vibrato with
With-
that saxophone.
Yes.
And I remember when we were little, you would say, "Todd, don't bat your eyes at me."
Yes, don't bat your Yes, yes. If I would have to correct him, he would bat his eyes, and I would say, "Todd, don't bat your eyes," because that was a sign of he was rebelling against me. Don't bat your eyes against me, Todd. And he would stop.
Yes. And he had a infectious laugh.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you
Yes.
get Troy and Todd together. Oh, they could laugh.
We had a lot of fun.
And he enjoyed lifting weights.
Yes.
Mhm.
Got his body looking really good.
And he liked his hair.
Liked his hair.
Just so.
Oh yes, had beautiful hair. He really did have beautiful hair. It stayed blonde even in his adult life. He didn't do anything with it. It was nice and blonde.
And I remember he had a couple things. He would always get nosebleeds,
Yes.
and you would have to give him.
Vitamin K. For a long time, we didn't know that vitamin K would stop them. But a doctor, Lisa, something happened.
No battery.
Okay.
I don't know when. You probably need to plug that in, don't you, while we're doing that?
I thought about that earlier.
Okay, let me just stop it here.
Okay, so we were talking about Todd and his laugh and his hair. He was very particular about it.
I remember when he got his first job at January's. Oh my. He was so proud of that job, and he learned that job. He learned about paint, he learned about colors, and he wanted to talk about it. He wanted to come home and tell us, and he did. He told us about wallpaper. He learned about wallpaper. He learned about companies that sold wallpaper, and about how he was able to learn how to mix paints, and he loved that job. He was proud of himself.
Tell me what kind of driver he was.
He was a maniac. If fast is an understatement. And hugging the wall on 76 and going 76, it scares you. I was very scared. One time I can remember I was with him doing that, and I just said, but my brother Jack was like that, and I always thought Todd was like Jack.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that was his personality. That's what he did, and that's not unusual for teenage boys.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, I just didn't ride with him very much.
Right. Dad, what are your special memories of Todd?
Well, the church there at Mogador had a big yard, probably about 11 acres total land, and maybe 10 of it was grass. So we were mowing the front part, and we used to have family devotions, and we'd pray for a tractor, specifically a Cub lowboy with a belly mower. And so we still remember the business meeting when Mark Wilson and Jim Tomlins says, we'll buy the tractor.
Mm-hmm.
And they went together and they bought the tractor, and Todd was paid by the church to mow that front yard. Then we started mowing the backyard. I think he got paid $4 an hour or something, $3 something an hour. And he did an immaculate job. And he did the trimming without having a weed eater. He did it by his hand clippers along the building. And it looked like a golf course, and he took pride in that.
Yes, he did, and the rows in the front yard were just straight as an arrow. I don't know how he did that, but he really took pride in doing that. And I recall when Jeb took it over, because Todd had his own job, so we said Jeb was like 11. I mean, and he was little. He was like Johnny. Jeb, his rows were crooked. Todd would come home and look out the front door and just be so disappointed in those rows. But Jeb got to where his rows were nice and straight too.
Mm-hmm. Took him some time.
Took him some time. He was little. He was too little to be doing that. I recall.
Yeah.
I'd stand there at the front door and just watch and watch and watch and watch, because I just felt like he was just this little boy, just about the size of Johnny now, and this huge tractor, and that's just a mother's thing. And Dad would just say,
he'd be fine. The clutch was, of course, the left foot, and he had to go off
Set
the
up
seat,
way up on
down like that to push that clutch. But he'd get it, put it in gear. Oh, it was great. I loved it.
and he was able to make him some money.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Jeb and his birth and his personality and his gifts.
Well, he was born when we were at the church in Fort Wayne, 1973, and we talked a little bit about that before, but then we got sidetracked or something. But he was our third baby, of course, and when I got to the hospital, the nurses said, is this your first baby? And I said, no, it's my third. I remember them immediately saying, oh, my, this is her third baby. They immediately took my bed out of where I was and put me down in the delivery room, because they just knew I was going to come quickly or something. I didn't think about that, but I knew that I was ready to have this baby. So we went down there. In no time, he was born. I was at the hospital 20 minutes, and he was born. And he was 8 pounds, and he was big. He was just big chest. But he had these bright red lips and big eyes, and he was the gorgeous baby, just gorgeous.
And his skin tone was.
Yes, he was a little darker, than what you and Todd were.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a little bit from the frills.
Mm-hmm.
So he was, I tell you what, it was a big event in that church, and all of our friends around there for Jeb to be born. He was very spoiled, because he was the prince of the church. Mrs. R worked in the nursery and did a lot of things around the church, and she just, oh my goodness, she spoiled him. And he loved Mrs. R, and he loved Donna, her daughter. And but Jeb, even from the time he was little, he was a child of few words, and even to this day, at 46 years old, he's a man of few words. Now, if you get him talking about something, it's unusual. Now, he can talk, and he's a very good speaker, and he can talk, and he talks very well, but that's not what he does. He's not a talker. Yes, he
Behind
just,
the scenes.
even when he was little, I just knew he wasn't going to grow up to be a talker.
We have an idea that he talks at Lowe's
I'm sure he talks.
and probably does quite well.
I'm sure he does.
Because he's a leader.
He is a leader. I remember when he was ordained as a deacon. Remember that service?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, how is that going to go? I wasn't really sure but when he got up there and he started talking and his face took a different look and he started giving his testimony, I thought, is that Jeb?
He did
Remember
great.
that? Do you remember that? How beautiful that was?
Yes, it
He's
was
got it
So
in him.
he has it in him, but that's just not his natural inclination. So the Lord gave him Candace so that she could talk.
Yes.
Candace has all the words in the world, and
That's
she
great.
can take care of that talking
It's
business.
a balance.
It's a balance.
So, talking about Jeb, what about his school years and his decision to go into the military and how that was for you? Let's start with school. What kind of a student was he?
Oh, he made wonderful grades in grade school up until like high school. That's when his grades started going down because he lost interest. But he's very bright. He could read when he was 4 years old, and spelling just came easy for him, so easy. And he was a very good student until he got other things to think about ninth grade.
What do you think made him want to go to the military?
I think he just felt naive in life, growing up in our home, and he just needed to grow up. He didn't want to go to college. Don't you think that's what it was?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't want to go to college, and he had talked to a lot of different people, and they advised him to go to the Air Force. They treat you a little better than the Army or the Marines. You're treated better in the Air Force, so that's what he chose. But
And how was that on you as parents?
well, it was just a hard time to see him. Todd left in June, and Jeb went to the military in October. So we had that summer with him, but we were consumed with looking for Todd.
Yes,
And
we
then
were.
I'll never forget, we had to take Jeb to Indianapolis, and that's where all the recruits were going to meet, and then they were going to take a bus and go wherever they go. I forget, where did they go? Somewhere.
San Antonio.
I think San Antonio. They took them to the airport, and then they went to San Antonio, yes. He said, just drive up to the curb and let me out. And, I think he just knew it was going to be hard, and it was just going to be hard. So I remember, because it was like a hotel or something. So we stopped at the curve. He got his luggage, and the walk was kind of curved. And I remember watching him, and he didn't turn around and look back. I wanted him to turn around and look back, but I don't think he could trust himself to turn around and look back.
He made his mind up.
Made his mind up, and he knew he just had to keep going. Oh,
I think it was especially hard on you because Todd had disappeared.
oh
Now
it
Jeb's going off to the military.
just was like I was being drained or something. It was hard. It was really hard.
If you could have looked ahead to all the joys ahead,
It would have helped, but life
but you
isn't
did.
like
No, you did
life
not.
isn't like that.
And we need to talk about Lisa.
Yes, we didn't talk about you. We just talked about the baby years and a little bit with you and Todd. But as you grew up, you You were not difficult in any. Only thing I had to make you do was practice your piano. And you started lessons when you were 5, and you had lessons throughout your life. And of course, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old child doesn't want to practice, but she had to go to lessons on Monday night, so she had to practice. So we had this rule that she wanted to play whatever she wanted to play. So we said, you practice your lesson, and then you play all you want. So that's one thing, that's about the only thing I remember we had to make her do. She was a very compliant child and obedient child, and she would do the dishes and didn't complain about them. She would help me pick up the house at night so it wouldn't be cluttered before we went to bed. And I mean, I appreciate that. That's a wonderful thing, and she did that even early. It wasn't in teenage years. She would just help me pick up the house, and
she loved the kitty cat.
And she loved the cat. Yes, she loved the cat a lot. She wanted the cat. And so, and then even in high school, she had, the friends that she had were always good friends.
Good
She
girls.
did not navigate toward, because there were some girls in school that were questionable in the way they behaved. She did not navigate toward them. She went to the girls that were well behaved and Christian girls. So that was a wonderful pleasure to Dad and I, that she was like that.
And still friends with a lot of them now.
Yes, yes. And you know, when we moved to Mogador, that was the thing that brought Lisa and Troy together. She met Troy there, and while we were there, the wedding was there in 1988.
88.
That was a big affair.
Big.
All of our family came.
Mm-hmm.
Debbie and Denise sang, and everybody
was
came. It was
beautiful.
wonderful. It was like,
That was beautiful.
you didn't expect it, but they did, and it was wonderful. So Lisa has been a wonderful. It's been a wonderful experience having Lisa as a daughter.
It's a joy.
Joy, yes, yes. So
I tell her she's the best.
she's the best. So, and you know, as we grow older and she has children and we grow old together, life just gets sweeter and sweeter with your child.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as she grows into adulthood and it gets sweeter and more blessed.
So, I'm a product of my home,
Yes,
and a big part of our home was family devotions.
yes,
And I remember those
yes.
clearly.
I remember, this was a funny thing. All 5 of us kneeling at the couch, and Napoleon walks across our backs. The cat, Napoleon the cat, walks across our backs. Well, that was the end of that session. We all fell apart. No more praying.
But it wasn't just praying. There
No.
was scripture reading.
Yes, scripture
and
reading.
Dad would teach something.
Yes.
Sometimes he would teach manners, or he would focus on drinking or smoking or
Yes.
temptation. But it was always fun. It was never dreaded.
Yes.
Like, oh dear, we have to go to family devotions.
Yes.
Dad made sure it was enjoyable and we looked forward to it.
Yeah.
And then we always ended with prayer, and all of us prayed,
Yes, we took turns praying.
and we prayed for specific things,
We did.
Like the tractor we prayed for. The
and
tractor.
cars,
And cars.
and school bills,
Yes,
Yes, we did.
and God answered, and that built our faith as children.
yes.
So I thank you, Dad and Mom,
you're
for that took sacrifice on your behalf to set that time apart.
Yes.
And we weren't just Christians in name only. You lived it in front of us,
We tried to, yes.
and that leads me to you have experienced need in your life because pastors aren't always paid a lot, and you have experienced gifts,
Mm-hmm.
some huge gifts in your lives.
That's right. We have.
What are some of those gifts that you can remember that people gave you that just were at the right time?
Blew us away. when we lived in Indiana, one of the elderly ladies that just loved Dad, and Dad knocked on her door when he was out knocking on doors one day. Dad, you should tell this, but she was getting ready to end her life because she was so disappointed in so many things, and Dad knocked on her door, so she attributes him, and she started coming to our church. So Dad, you can tell about that, and so when we moved away, she passed away. They called Dad, and you can tell about that.
It was Mogador.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Mildred Neal.
Elder Neil.
Yes.
She was quite a woman. She had been the secretary to the president of the union, the UF whatever.
With the rubber companies.
Rubber, yeah. She was somebody. And her husband had died. She had a son who was an attorney in Cleveland, and they had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, as I remember. And so at a point in her life, she was active in church. Went to, I think it was Calvary Baptist Church, and she and her husband were active there. But they started going up to Cleveland on the weekends, spending time with son and daughter-in-law and the grandchildren, and didn't go to church.
Uh-huh.
So she was backslidden, probably still born again, of course, but
Yes.
backslidden. Anyways, so I knocked on her door. She was in despair, and
Over
her granddaughter had been a straight A student, and she got into drugs, and her grades dropped, and her granddaughter was in trouble. So Mrs. Neal was ready to just throw in the towel.
Despair.
She started coming to church, and there were 2 other ladies, widows. They sat together and they called themselves the 3 Musketeers.
Yeah, because 2 of them were Mildred, and the other one was the 3 M's. They all had M names.
Yeah.
So they were the 3 Musketeers.
Musketeers.
Yeah.
So we left that church in '89 and went to Indiana, and I was working at the Veterans Home when they got a call from the daughter of Mrs. Neal and said, Mom has died, and we want you to come and have the funeral. I said, well, you need to ask the pastor of the church if that will be okay. She said, okay, I will. She said, we'll pay your way. So she asked him, he said, that's all right. So they paid my plane ticket, and went to the funeral, preached the funeral, went to their house afterwards for food, and Troy was going to take me to the airport, and he said, Dad, open your envelope. And I opened it up and said, $500. He said, no, Dad, look at that, a little closer. It was $5,000.
You probably needed that.
Oh
Yes,
my.
yes. It met many needs, and Jeb was so discouraged. Dad was able to buy him his first car with that money, and I think it did wonders for him.
Second car,
Well,
because your dad bought it.
oh
back.
yeah, he
Yeah.
used that little car that Dad gave us, but I don't think Papa did that as his first car. Jeb just drove it.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but anyway, we were able to, and it was a cute car, nice car,
Mm-hmm.
and
And
he
that-
liked it.
That was good for Jeb to see.
Yes,
God.
yes.
He really wanted a truck, and I didn't want him to have a truck, so I encouraged him to get that little 2-door. And so years later, he got a truck.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. But God used people in our church to buy us cars.
Yes.
He used Grandpa and Grandma Massie
Oh, yes.
and Mama and Papa Friels gave us things.
Oh, every winter they bought your winter coats.
And people sometimes paid our school bill
Mhm.
Yes.
because we couldn't.
Roy Conley did one time.
Yes.
$700.
It's just you have X amount of dollars and it just doesn't go far enough.
So the Lord makes up
The
for
Lord
it.
makes up for it.
Yeah. Let's move on to your 20 years at Boardman Baptist Church.
20 years.
Your last church, Dad is a pastor.
Last hurrah.
Yes. Of your 5 churches, that was number 5.
Mhm.
And we know why you went there and how God brought you there, but just talk about some of the highlights of those years, Dad, for you as the pastor.
Well, before we went there, I'd asked the Lord to send us to a difficult place. Now, Youngstown is a difficult area because they've had most of those steel mills to close, and
Yes.
economically, it still is hard hit. And I meant church too, difficult. So the Lord took me up on my prayer request, and the church was struggling. There was a few years before that they thought about disbanding.
Or merging with another
Merging
church
with another
or
church.
closing or something.
So it was meant to be, and the challenges were overcome. And it wasn't too long into the pastorate that it began to dawn on me. I am obviously the designated one to help this dear church family to build a new building, because we had the land, and it's just the right setup.
You were running out of room.
We had no more room because people were sitting out in the foyer. And when Dave and Pat Warren, he would be our state rep, he would come and he'd say, I just can't believe this. Because most places they go, churches were like, there were no, lots of empty spaces. Our church, because we were just small, we were just crammed in there. And he just couldn't believe it. So we had to build.
We had to
We
build.
were forced to build, or we would have gone down.
So you came there in '96.
Mm-hmm.
When did you start your building fund?
2000. We started with $30,000. They already had saved that money to their credit, and we just kept adding to it. We decided that we'd like to have a bunch of money before we went to the bank to borrow the rest of it, and it took us 13 years, 12, 13 years, and they saved up between between 500,000 and 600,000. We had that much money, assets, cash.
That's a pretty good chunk for us to start out with. We were happy to do that.
And you had to make some plans.
Oh,
Like you and Dad, Mom, you had to get some things in order for all this to happen.
we were like, the children were out of the house. It was just Dad and I. We gave it more than 100%. We always joked and said, I'll take care of the inside, Dad, you take care of the outside. So he was out there knocking on doors and doing that, and and our church just grew. It just grew. And I mostly worked inside. I worked with the music, worked with the office, worked with everything, the Sunday school teachers and all that stuff on the inside.
As a result, she didn't get enough vitamin D.
Right.
Yeah, I was inside too much. But that was our partnership.
Yep, it's good.
And you lived for
Mm.
Boardman Baptist Church.
Yeah, Dad would go over there. He'd be over there by 6 or 6:30 every day. And I would get up and do what I had to do, and I'd be over there many times by 8:30 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a little later as I got older.
Mm-hmm.
But we loved it. We never felt like, oh, I just don't think I can stand this anymore. I never had those feelings.
The people were very sweet,
Wonderful people, and
very sweet people.
we just,
And you gained young families
Yes.
with children.
and we were able to have wonderful vacation Bible schools and midweek Bible club,
Mhm.
and our Sunday school classes grew, and we were able to split them up and have more, and young couples, and we couldn't have built the new building if we hadn't had all that. You have to have all that. You're not going to be able to pay for it.
And talk a little bit about, is it Mid-Baptist or Baptist Church Planters?
Baptist Church.
Talk a little bit about them and how they played a big part
Yes.
in getting that building done.
Well, we were trying to figure out who can we have to come in here and help us build this building. And we had tried one group and it didn't work out. So David Warren, state representative for the GARBC churches there in Ohio, suggested that we go with Martin Eaton.
Baptist Church.
Well,
What did he call
he hadn't
himself?
merged with him yet.
What did he call himself?
Let's see. I forget exactly what the name of that was. But anyway, Martin Eaton was the head of it and had been for 30-some years, or about 30 years. So we contacted him. He came to the church. He talked to us, and it was a fit.
That was early on, like 2006 or way before we
10.
started. Was it 10?
Probably 10, 9.
Anyway.
somewhere, anyway, so then he had a partner that came with him, Dale Murphy. Well, after we initially started talking to Martin, his organization merged with Baptist Church Planters. So he became under their umbrella, and they became his boss, which was different for him because he was used to running his own organization. But he was getting up in years, and he knew a change needed to be made. So, giving him credit, he looked ahead, and that got worked out. So they came. We provided housing quarters for the Murphys and for the Edens.
Your church paid for those?
Our church paid for the apartment
Yes.
and the utilities and so forth, and we gave them a stipend every week to both families. And then the church men and the ladies helped build that building.
Yes. But if you compare, we compared if we had gone in the city and hired a general contractor, the price of our building would have been a whole lot more
Yes.
because
Yes.
our building ended up being
1.3 million.
1.3 million, and had we had a contractor, we wouldn't have been able to work hand in hand with them because they're going to go in there and do something, and they're going to do it, and it's done. Whereas you have Martin, and you work with him on a daily basis, and you can make changes, and you can, you know, you just don't have to go exactly by the blueprints. You can make things the way you want them. So it was better. We got a better building or a cheaper price.
We were the designated ones. We knew that, and we just had to stay at it. And we had a few problems, and we went to the Lord in prayer and said, Lord, if you'll help us to get this building built, we'll give you the glory. So right now, I don't know who's going to listen to this, but God is getting the glory.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So
And, go ahead.
when we had the dedication service, that was the theme of our dedication service. To God be the glory, because He gets the glory. Nobody else. Not Martin,
It's
not Dennis and Eleanor, nobody. God.
God.
It was a wonderful service.
Oh,
And
oh.
Dad, I know your heart was to get those contractors paid.
Yes.
And the Lord helped the
Mhm.
church to get all of those different companies and men, probably some non-Christian
Yeah.
men, they were all paid.
They were all
They
paid.
all paid.
The what was the name of the plumbing company? It begins with a K. Anyway, they said we told them we're having trouble. They said, "Tell you what, you just pay us $1,000 a month till you get it paid off." But the others, we were able to pay them on time. The heating and air conditioning, the parking lot, right down the line.
Because you had to.
Yes, how many years from the time you broke ground in June of 2013?
June of 2013 was
Until
great.
2 years.
Because
A
we
little
had
less than 2 years.
June of 2013, 14, 15, February of 15,
Mhm.
February
Your
of
first church service.
we had the first church
the
service.
coldest
The coldest day of the year, which was amazing.
And we came over for that.
Did you come over? Did Sarah and Beth?
Sarah
Yes.
was
Yes,
there.
and
Yes.
we thought, well, nobody's going to come. All the churches were closed, but we said we're going to have the service. We had 80 people show up.
Yes.
We were shocked,
It was
weren't
wonderful.
we?
Yes.
We were just
It was
shocked.
wonderful.
And then you had your opening main service
In May,
in May.
the day, the Saturday, and then the following Saturday we had our 50th
Yes.
wedding
Yes.
anniversary.
It was
Because that was our 50 years in April.
That was wonderful.
It was a wonderful time.
And I remember,
Jeb and Candace came up, and
Yes.
you were there all week long, and it was like,
It was good.
it was wonderful.
the church also celebrated your 10th anniversary with them
Yes.
in 2006. That was a big deal. And then they also celebrated the church's
50th.
50th anniversary, which was 2000.
6.
It was 2006.
Okay.
In
Both the
March,
same year.
March
Okay.
of 2006.
So those were wonderful services. So your goal was to get that new building built before you could no longer pastor.
Right.
Because you didn't know what the future held. You wanted to continue to pastor till you were 72 or so.
Mhm.
I remember that was your heart.
As long as he could.
As long as you could. And with Mom as your helper.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dad, tell me a little bit about how you came to that decision that this is the time that I'm winding down and maybe not retire completely from ministry, but retire as a senior pastor.
Well, we would have liked, if we could have, we would have liked to stay there longer. But we were in our early 70s. And Mom, she'll verify this, she kept saying to me in the last few years, I'm just getting tired. I just don't think I can keep doing this. And she was being honest with me. I heard her, but we were trying to get that building built.
Just kept going.
So I thought, I hope she doesn't have a heart attack. But she made it.
Yes.
So Jeb had already asked us, I forget what year, when they came up to visit Dad, when you retire, would you and Mom consider moving to Valdosta? Well, we talked it over and we said, yeah, Jeb, that's what we'll do. But Jeb didn't know, old hard-headed me, if I'd ever do it. But I did.
I think he thought you would never do it.
But we did. And it all worked out. The church was so wonderful to us. They gave us $13,000 and said, go buy a car down in Valdosta when you get down there.
What year was that, Daddy?
Yeah, what
16.
year?
16.
2016. September 11th was your last service.
14th.
Was it 14th?
No, wait a
Well,
minute.
it was the 11th.
Was it the 11th?
Because
Okay.
it took us
Okay.
3
She
days to
remembers.
back up and then 2 days to
That's
get
right.
down
And
here.
then you moved.
That's
We
right.
moved, yeah.
And I'm sure you were full of mixed emotions about that time.
Oh, yes, especially Dad.
You know, probably scary at some
Yes.
points, you know, just like, what have I done?
Yeah, because we were going to have to come down here and live on Social Security.
Right, right.
Well, Pastor Owens, senior pastor of First Baptist Church in Valdosta, where we belong, asked me, and he said the wheels are going to turn slowly, but he asked me to eventually come on and be like the shut-in pastor to visit people that were shut in and nursing homes and so forth. So that worked out, and I got some money for that weekly or bi-monthly, bi-weekly, however you say it, bi-monthly, I think. Anyway, I worked at the hospital for a while to supplement my income, but I love this work at the church. Oh,
Yes.
I love it so much.
That's your heart,
It's still
It's
ministry.
ministry.
To people.
Mm-hmm.
and you are considered a part-time pastor at the
Mhm.
church. And people have grown to love you and Mom, and
People call him. He didn't used to get calls, but he gets calls.
you've done funerals.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, looking back to coming down here in 2016, that was a big adjustment for you.
Oh,
You
yes.
really were putting the brakes on your life, and
Mm-hmm.
things were completely different than how you were used to living. You downsized from what to what?
Big 3-bedroom house with a full basement and big everything to 2-bedroom apartment. It was sufficient for us,
Yes.
but we had to really, really, really downsize.
And we didn't have a golf cart anymore.
And we didn't have a golf cart, and we had our grandchildren complaining.
Oh, they were mad.
But you had them.
I had
and you
them.
had
We
Jeb and Candace.
We had
Yes.
Jeb and Candace.
5 minutes away.
Yes. It was a wonderful time. But you know, that transition time, it was we came in September. Within a few weeks, we bought the car that they gave us the money for. We had it 2 or 3 days and had an accident, and it totaled it. And then within a few days later, I had a back injury with a compressed fracture in my back. So we had all these things happening to us as soon as we got down here. So it had the potential to discourage us.
And Dad wasn't working
And
yet.
Dad, no, he didn't have a job until Christmas. And so we were gradually eating into our money, and we thought, you know, we're just not going to have money. He's got to get a job. And I was going to the doctor and
In pain.
in pain. That fall was very, very difficult because of the pain. And we couldn't find out what was wrong with me for a while. And, but that, he got the job in Christmas, so he started making money. And then in April of the next year, Pastor Chuck Owens called him and said, your job is going to start, or it's March, your job is going to start the 1st of April.
And that was an answer to prayer.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. But it took me a year or more to be pain-free.
Yes, it did.
And I can still have pain if I
You push yourself.
push myself. Because a back fracture is something that nobody wants to have.
Right. Did you find this adjustment to semi-retired life more difficult or less difficult overall?
Well, she needed to for her health reasons, because she has ongoing digestive problems, and she could not have kept on going. My stamina still held up. And I, after we got down here, I said, Lord, I got real serious with the Lord. And
Is it over? Is it over?
yeah, I
Am
said,
I done
Lord,
for?
I still have energy and strength. I want to serve you. I want to do something for you. I want to finish well. So he heard my prayer, put me to work.
Yes. Yes. And it's a blessing, Dad, that you're still able to minister to people. You have health.
I love to do it.
Yes.
I love people.
Do you want to talk about any challenges with your health?
Nobody wants to hear my problems.
They're real, though.
They're
I'm
real.
so thankful that even if I do have these problems, I'm still able to be in the choir at church, because that's sort of my lifeline.
Yes. Music.
Music,
Ministry.
when during that quarantine time, it was so hard to not have that.
Oh, my.
And you miss the people, because you become like a family. There's like 35 of us. We're all a family, and we didn't have that. We still don't have it, but we're hoping to get back. So at least I could do the choir, and then I started doing the bells with Sarah, and that keeps me going, because I have John and Callie. If I didn't have John and Callie, and Jeb and Candace,
Right.
I don't know. I would be doing very well.
So let's talk about the transition from your 2-bedroom apartment in, 2019
2019
to
October.
this house here with Jeb and Candace. Talk about how that came to be and what that is like for you.
Well, you can't talk about this unless you talk about dear Candace, and she's sitting in on these sessions, as you probably have heard her sweet laughter. But she had it on her heart, because Jeb and Candace had talked, how can we add on to our present house, which was over on Delwood Drive, here in Valdosta, that they lived in for several years. And there was no feasible way
This wouldn't work.
to do it. Because Jeb wanted to shop, and they thought about adding on to the house, and there was just no way to do it. So Candace got in the car. I think Callie must have gone with her and John. And they looked around and tried to find a place, and they came in this neighborhood, which we are in now, and loved it, and looked at the houses, and finally one day Candace found this house that we live in now, and she looked at it, saw that beautiful shop in the backyard. I mean, beautiful shop, because Jeb's always wanted a shop. He's a mechanic at heart, and a very good one at that. Excellent. And then she saw these 2 rooms added onto the back of the ranch-style home that the Pastor Reddick, had built on for his office. Plus it had a full-size bathroom and a big room, fairly big room, for his books. Library.
Mm-hmm. Which
So-
are where these shelves behind you are from.
That's where they're from. So it's this wonderful story how it all worked out. There was a dear man in the church that found out that Candace and Jeb wanted this house, and it had been sold out from underneath them, because they basically didn't have their other house sold. And he took the money out of the bank, paid for the house, and said, and put it in their name, said, when you get your other house sold, just give me the money. And it worked.
Miracle.
That's a miracle on miracles.
Miracle.
Yeah, how many people does anybody know? Does anybody have a friend like that that would buy a house for
I've
you
never
and said,
heard this story
whenever
in my whole
you
life.
get your house sold, just pay me the money? And
That is a gift from God to you and Dad.
It is.
yes, yes,
And to Jeb and Candace
yes.
for wanting to take care of you.
That's the truth. Honor thy father and thy mother.
Mhm.
I mean, we know why we don't have any money. There's an explanation. But we do have Social Security.
Yeah.
But Jeb and Candace Thankfully, don't hold that against us.
And to your credit, Dad, I know that you've given and given and given over and above to people
I have.
all
We
through
have.
your life. And you've also sometimes gone without, and you've given above your tithe.
I've always given above tithe.
And I knew, it was easy for me to say, but I knew God was going to take care of you.
Oh,
And
that's sweet.
but you know, you were living it, so it's probably harder sometimes to. But
Well.
he has shown himself faithful to you and Mom all your life, especially these last 4 years.
Yes.
And now you're here. What is it like living with
We love it.
John and Cal
We
right
love
there?
it. We love it.
And every day you see them.
I get to see them every day.
Yep.
If I don't see them, I'm unhappy.
Mamo, I want some popcorn.
And grape juice too, please. No, Johnny is and Callie, they're just
Oh, they're precious.
everything.
They enrich your lives.
Enrich our lives, and
You had all those years that you were so blessed with Jesse and Jack and Emma. God just
Mhm.
Yes.
let y'all spend all that time with them, and now that they're
Yes.
grown, you've had the opportunity to come and invest in the lives of Callie and John.
Yeah, we did not
That's
talk
how we
about
see
that, but
those years.
those years at Boardman,
Oh,
you would take Jesse, Jack, and Emma
Many
for
weekends.
weekends,
Mhm.
and
And
that
give-
gave me a break.
Yes.
But I know it did a lot for you
Oh, yeah.
and them.
Yes, it was beneficial to all of us. And we were close enough in miles that we could do that. And it influenced Jesse so much that that's where he wanted to get married. He and Jessica, he wanted to get married in
That's
that new
sweet.
church. And that was a wonderful, I don't even think I can have words to describe that day.
But because you did that for our children, they have awesome memories, and they were greatly impacted by you and Dad. And not only your love for them, your unconditional support of them, but they saw your lives lived for God.
I hope so. I
We
hope
were
so.
poured out.
And
Had our foot to the floor.
another thing about Jesse and Jack, Emma didn't grow up fast enough to do it, but every summer when they grew up, they participated in our Vacation
Yes,
Bible School
they
platform
did.
skits, and
Yes,
they were
did.
terrific. And that, I hope that built them. I hope it did, because it was wonderful.
And Lisa,
And Lisa,
every year
every
played
year.
the piano for our Vacation Bible School.
For
Let's
20
give her
years.
a hand.
For 20
It was
years.
beautiful.
She came because we didn't have, I was the church pianist and I had to be elsewhere. So she was there and she could play
Oh,
anything
so-
we wanted to sing.
So made it so easy for us.
It was so
It was
fun.
a big deal for the summer to come and Vacation Bible School week.
It was so fun to do that.
She's running out of steam, but whoever's listening to this woman knows how to write a script for a Vacation Bible School.
Give her an idea, and she'll run with it.
You also got to take the boys, and probably Emma, to the Canfield Fair every
Oh.
year.
Oh,
You took
yes.
them bowling. You
Yes.
took them on
You did.
adventures that they would have never
Yes.
gone
No.
on
They
before.
still talk about
Yeah, you
Papa
poured into
and
them.
Mama taking
Taking
them
on trips,
places,
taking them
and
on
they didn't
trips.
want to come home.
And Jesse would say, Papa, when we get close to home, he'd say, Papa, can we just keep going? We won't ever forget that. Oh, it's precious.
So grandchildren have been a great blessing and healer in
Oh,
your life,
yes.
because you've had some trials and pain with Todd being missing, but and you know nothing ever replaces him,
No.
but God is good. And
Yes, it soothes the sorrow.
yes,
You know, because when Savannah died, I thought, oh, there's nothing so bad. And the thing that was painful was to see you and Troy have to put your firstborn baby in the ground. That I can't tell you how that pained me. It was just so painful.
Lisa stood beside that casket in the church. She said, Dad, I want another baby.
She wasn't giving up. Yes, she wasn't.
and I know Mom was afraid
I was
for
afraid
me
that,
to have another baby and the same thing to happen.
but that wasn't what was wrong with Savannah.
So, back to Todd. Losing Todd when you did, how did that impact your fruitfulness in ministry to help other people? Like,
Oh,
Do
Lisa.
you see that now, looking back, that God really used that?
Go ahead, sweetie.
Well, you know, you don't really know how to put your finger on. You just know that that's an event. And I remember probably the first year or so after that, Randy Patton wanted us to speak at a pastor's conference and I said, Randy, I cannot do that. I can't even think of it without crying, and I certainly can't speak of it. I said, it's going to take me years to heal, because that's how it was with me. I couldn't even speak about it
Right.
without crying. So I
Right.
had nothing to offer anybody,
At
because
that
I
point?
hadn't healed enough from it.
Right.
Now, Dad, he's different. He was able to talk about it. He told everybody he met about it,
Mhm.
and that's how he dealt with it.
Yeah.
So it was a wound.
But you decided early on,
Yes.
this is not going to come between us.
No.
What was it that you said, Dad? You
We're
know,
going to be tight. We're not going to let this.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
we all, Troy, you and Jeb, Mom and myself, we got together and we said, we make a pact with ourselves
We're
that
going
we're never going to let anything come between us.
Yes.
That's before Candace came into the picture.
Yes. We were going to stick together as a
Yeah,
family,
'cause
no matter what.
You see families that have heartache and death and whatever, and sometimes it breaks them apart.
Right.
And we were not going to do that.
And we've kept that pact.
We've kept that.
And you've kept that between the two of you, because
Yes.
75% of marriages who go through what you and Dad went through and what Troy and I went through with Savannah, they don't make it.
They don't need it.
Well,
It's a testimony
It
to
is-
God.
It's a test of your marriage.
well, it is. Well, she needs me because I'm the daddy of Todd. I need her because she's the mommy of Todd.
Neither of us made that happen.
No, you did not turn on each other and blame each
No.
other.
No.
Todd, whatever happened in Todd's life was something that he decided sometime back, going down that path, and that event, whatever that event was,
Right.
came from him, not us.
Right. Personal decision.
And you know, there's something in my mind, you know, where the scripture says that, can you quote it exactly about how God will cut them off
Yes.
if they,
It's in Hebrews.
it's in Hebrews, if you are his child and then you are not walking in his ways. What are the words exactly? It says
Well, he talks about chastening.
the chastening, and you will be cut off. Isn't
Well,
that
there
the-
is another passage that says there is a sin unto death, and it could mean that.
Or the verse that talks about some will sleep.
And yes, and
Yeah.
sometimes I think that because Todd trusted Christ, he belonged to the Lord. He had
Yes.
tenderness and love for God, and then temptations,
Mm-hmm.
and he started down the wrong path.
Sure
And
did.
God didn't allow him to keep going. Well, for it, whatever it was that happened.
So, with everything that's happened in your life, you know, the valleys and the mountaintops and the trials and the blessings, what would you say to someone who doesn't think God works all things out for good?
Just trying.
Yeah, just try him. Yeah.
He keeps his word.
He keeps his word. He
And you know, something in all of this, the Christian brothers and sisters in Christ who have encouraged us in our times of trial, they are so precious.
Yes.
I mean, some are from years ago, you know, previous pastors.
yes.
Some, and Eleanor's family and my family, so supportive, so encouraging.
I can remember seeing somebody even years after Todd disappeared, and once they would see us, they'd just come and cry right,
Yeah.
Yes.
right on our shoulder
Yes.
because they were so hurt for us.
Yeah.
And that
touches you.
yes, it
Means a
does.
lot.
Yes.
So here's what's happened. Because we have been hurt, we know what it is to have hurt feelings. we've been able to help lots, I don't know how many, but some people that have had broken hearts.
Yes.
And once they hear that you have a broken heart, they sometimes will open up and share their broken heart.
Yes.
Whereas, because they know we understand.
Yes. Yeah, people probably look at you from afar and think, oh, they have a wonderful life serving God and everything's perfect and their family's perfect, but
They don't know.
no, everyone has hurts.
Everybody.
And to know that about you makes people feel at ease many times
Yes.
to open up.
Mm-hmm. We've found that to be true.
Oh, yes, we found that. Once they know, they'll share their hurt too.
What scripture verses? What can you think of this scripture verses that you've come to claim as great promises or just treasures in your life?
I'm going to tell you one that Mom chose before we moved to Boardman. We were still languishing over Todd, and she found that scripture. What is it? The Lord will give you the desires of your heart.
Oh,
Keep thy
trust in
eyes
the Lord with all your heart.
No,
No.
not that one, but now it's just lost.
Delight thyself in the Lord.
Delight
He shall give thee
thyself
the
in the
desires.
Lord, and He shall give thee the desires of thy heart. And I
She
think
did.
that's what we've tried to do, is delight in the Lord and His work, and He's given us what we needed.
Yes. And you've never been rich and wealthy and had the latest and greatest of anything.
Anything,
But
but we've
you've
had our
had-
needs met.
And you've had blessings that money can't buy. I've seen that.
Yes.
Peace.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Lisa, we're glad that you're not bitter over disappointments, because we didn't have much money when you were growing up.
But money isn't the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Money doesn't.
When you came home from school, you had peace. You didn't have to come home to somebody yelling at you
No.
or
No.
fighting.
We
or
always had peace
We
and
always had-
joy.
in our house. Always.
Every vacation was fun, even if it
Yes.
was just to see relatives.
Yes.
Yeah.
We had a good time. Yes.
So, just to wrap this up, Dad, describe your call from God to the ministry and how you feel about answering that call now that you're on the back end.
Oh, wow, this is good. You want the short version or the long version?
We'll take the short.
Okay. I went to Bible college right out of high school. And most of the fellows in that small Bible college, of course, that's where I met Mom, had a call. Missionary, preacher, evangelist. But I didn't specifically have a call yet. I gravitated toward it, but I couldn't really say that God had called me. So I was asked to be in the college quartet in my freshman year, and we would travel from church to church. Those were wonderful experiences. We loved being with Brother Hurdle. We'd all cram in that 2-door Ford. He'd get a new Ford every year. And
Those big old guys crawling in the back seat.
it was a wonderful experience. You go to these churches, and
Plus, what's the girl's name? Sharp.
Carolyn Sharp.
Carolyn Sharp was their piano player, so it'd be the quartet and Carolyn. And
but anyway, go to these places, and I just kept asking the Lord, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to be a preacher? And for a while I thought, well, maybe I'm supposed to be an undertaker. So I went down to the mortuary science training school in Indianapolis and talked to the guy, and he had a real deadpan expression. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Anyway, that didn't seem to be the right thing, and I told my mom about it, but I didn't realize she'd been praying all these years for me to be a preacher. So I remember one time going to Carolyn Sharp's church in Tifton, Indiana, and her grandfather and grandmother lived in a little house behind her parents' house. And he had been a preacher, and he was a godly man. I forget his last name. And so quartet went out there and sang for them,
they were elderly.
and we had a time of prayer. And you know when those times of God's closeness of His presence, that was one of those times. And my heart was open. Lord, what do you want me to do? And it was like I heard a voice, but I didn't hear a voice. Feed my sheep, preach my word, and feed my sheep. Well, that describes my ministry.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
And there was one other time when I was trying to figure it out. I think it was prior to that. That was more of a defining moment at that preacher's house. Preach my word and feed my sheep. Well, that's biblical, that's scriptural. I know I have a call.
Yes.
And it's been validated by many, many, many people. It's still being validated. Dennis, you have pastoral gifts. You know.
Yeah.
And I love being a preacher. And I've asked God to help me to finish well. That's why when Jeb asked us up there several years ago, Dad, what are your plans? I knew exactly what he meant. I said, I'm going to die in the pulpit, Jeb. He said,
Jeb
no,
said,
Dad.
no, Dad, you're not going to do that.
But I want to go as far as I can go, as long as I can go
Yes.
for the Lord.
Yes.
Because right now in our country, we have a window of opportunity. I fear that someday they're going to close these churches for good.
Yeah.
But maybe they won't. But there is a window of opportunity for churches to do things for God. And in the church we go to now, it just seems like we're on the threshold of doing something for God. We've got such a fine ministerial staff
Yeah.
and such good people. But I know Satan wants to mess that up, just like he's trying all around the world to mess the world up. But I want to go as long as I can go.
Amen.
Does that answer your question?
What is your favorite hymn, Dad?
Well, for years I've said face to face, because that's what's going to happen. We're going to see our Lord. We're not just dreaming. We'll see him.
And Mom, how would you encapsulate being a pastor's wife to Dad all these years?
Oh.
Looking back over the ministry,
She's the best.
like, would you say it was a hard life or a blessed life?
Well, the comment I would have, I think that Dad gave me the freedom to minister any way that I wanted to. He never said, you can't do that, or I want you to do that, or
That
no.
decal, I didn't want you to put on the new church building.
Oh,
Down at the
yeah.
end of the hall.
That was
She's
small.
forgiven me for that.
Well, yeah, because somewhere you would say, oh, where were we? You said, oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, well,
Hobby Lobby.
yeah, we were, and I said, well, I wanted to put that on the end of the hallway, and you wouldn't have let me. And he said, I don't think he even remembered, but he just, because all those words of Christ, the names of Jesus and Christ, are in a
It would
shape
be
of a big
nice.
cross.
Yes.
I think they have it over on the wall at Northside. It's bigger than life size. It's beautiful. But that, I don't even think about that, but I'm just saying I had freedom, whatever I felt like that I needed to do. He trusted me with the music. He trusted me with the kids. He trusted me with Vacation Bible School.
You
'Cause
were
he
a
did-
team.
Yeah, he said, just do it and I'll come along and help you.
But it's
So-
easy when you're the best.
No, I'm not the best, but
Yes, you are.
he didn't handicap me
Right.
because I have creativity. That's part of who I am. I'm creative.
Right.
She does.
So he didn't. Dad doesn't have that in his
No.
personality, creativity.
No,
But I do, and that's just how I operate.
Your dad's helpmeet.
And Dad's helped me.
She is.
Yep, that's how it is. And I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Me too.
I remember early in life, I think when we were at Fort Wayne, I would see couples, maybe they would have just one or two children. Now, this is very naive, but this is what I thought. I wonder what kind of life they have. What do they do with their time, and who do they help, and who, because I knew what we were doing, but I often wondered, what do they do? And I thought, they're really missing out on something because they're not in the ministry. I used to
Wow.
think that,
Wow, Mom.
you know,
But that's how you felt about
that's
your,
how I felt
calling.
about
your life.
my life
That's
and what
sweet.
we were
Yeah.
doing. Of course, I've since learned better than that.
what is your favorite hymn, Mom?
I would say my favorite song to sing in church is "The Solid Rock." On Christ, the solid rock I stand.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yes.
She doesn't. Well, it's going to go into rock music. But anyway.
Not that kind of rock.
Not that kind of rock. But
Well, thank you, Dad and Mom, for letting me interview you. I know this was a big, trying ordeal, and it's not easy to sit and answer questions for several hours.
You're easy to look at.
yeah, you're easy on the eyes. We've left a lot of things out because you can't think of everything.
But this is going to be a treasure for our family,
Oh,
for future generations. We don't know how long the
True.
Lord will tarry.
no, we don't.
So I thank you for giving me your time.
Well,
Thank you for being our daughter and for thinking about even doing this
Yes.
and even suggesting that we would do this.
And
Even,
driving.
even desiring to do it.
And driving all the way from Ohio to be down here for Cali.
Yes, that was wonderful. Just
Well, I think the Lord put it on my heart, and I didn't want to brush it off and say, oh, I'll do that later, because I don't know.
I don't know. We may not be here next week.
I could be dead next week.
So I'm thankful that the Lord let us have this opportunity, Mom, and you have felt good enough,
Hmm?
and Dad, you've been willing.
I am willing.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Bye, everybody. It's been nice knowing you.